Chapter 630. The legacy of the two super sects, Daming Monastery and Fahua Monastery, was not the only thing at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. There was also the legacy of the Great Qian Empire, the behemoth of the North region in the past. Su Zimo had been secluded at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley for 20 years and his strength had already grown to an extremely frightening level. His growth was not only reflected in his comprehension of Buddhism. His cultivation of array formations was also improving day by day. The three formations were connected and it was difficult to achieve such an effect even if one of them was missing. Right in front of the mortals, the initially lofty immortals seemed to have encountered something and fell from midair one after another. How could this be? Could the heavens have opened their eyes and sent down a punishment? In the midst of the mortals' confusion, a figure rose into the air slowly. That person wore green robes and had delicate features. His expression was cold and there was a sinister killing intent between his brows as he wielded a blood-colored saber in his hands. That person looks familiar. I think so. The old woman opened her mouth slightly and looked at the figure in midair in disbelief, murmuring repeatedly, "It's him, it's him." "Grandma, who is that?" The child in her arms asked curiously when he caught sight of the figure in midair as well. "Second young Master Su. It's second young Master Su of the Su family." The old woman's voice trembled. Even after dozens of years, the old woman could still recognize Su Zimo at a glance. That was because even after dozens of years, there were no traces of time on second young Master Su's face, he was the same as before. Su Zimo glanced sideways at the old woman and child and nodded, the killing intent between his brows turning gentler. The old woman was stunned. That action was familiar and in her daze, she seemed to have returned to the past. Even after becoming an immortal, second young Master Su did not change. The child widened his eyes without blinking. They were both immortals. However, the child could not sense any fear or pressure from Su Zimo. The child's initially worried heart gradually calmed down. Su Zimo wielded Blood Quencher and soared into the air, looking down at Jinying Jinjuan who was fleeing frantically in Pingyang town with a mocking gaze. "You're still trying to escape." Su Zimo descended from the skies and raised his arms. Blood Quencher buzzed and quivered excitedly as he slashed down viciously at the crowd. A blood-red light gushed out. Boom! The crowd was split into two and the ground. 7 Jinying Jinjuan were sliced into two by the blood beam. Their organs were splattered all over the ground with a blood stench. This was the first time Blood Quencher had tasted blood since its birth. The saber's blood Qian Jinjuan was. In a flash, Su Zimo pounced into the crowd that was trying to escape. Bloods. Buzz. A blood-red ripple slowly spread out, streaking across the void and passing through the crowd. Poof. Poof. Poof course. Su is Su by the is Qian S by this A's, by S's by this. By the Su Dao by with his primordial spirit sealed, he did not even have the chance to leave his body before he was killed on the spot. Su's. If you continue running, you'll definitely be killed by that beast one by one. Perfected Lord Yundu, hurry and break the formation. We'll fight with our lives to buy time for you. That's right. Everyone, let's work together. Everyone yelled and gathered once more. Bursting with blood qi, they charged towards Su Zimo. The few perfected lords at the front were body-tempered cultivators. Bursting with blood qi, they brandished their halberds and spears and charged forward. Splash! Su Zimo's blood qi surged and the sound of a tsunami rumbled as he slashed in reverse with a frightening might. The saber momentum was heavy like a tsunami crashing against the shore. Clang! 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 Blood Quencher slashed down heavily on the weapons of the Jinying Jinjuan and released a tremendous force that was unstoppable like a tsunami. Exclamation point. Someone could not hold on any longer and spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. His palm was torn and his weapon flew out as he fell. With his essence spirit and spirit energy sealed, the Jining Jinjuan was only left with his body and blood qi. However, there was no way their bodies and blood qi could compare to Su Zimo. They were wielding dharmic weapons to begin with. Because their essence spirits were sealed and they could not channel their dharmic powers, the true might of their dharmic weapons could not be released and they could not defend against the sharpness of blood quencher. Exclamation point! Exclamation point! Blood flashed repeatedly. Although the remaining Jining Jinjuan gathered together, they could not defend against Su Zimo's massacre. After obtaining the legacy of the Saber Emperor and Shura's legacy in this life, Su Zimo's attainments in saber techniques had already reached a terrifying level. Countercurrent, raging tides, vortex and ripple of the sea calming manual. Ghost cry, blood flow, purgatory, white bones, fiend shadow and walking corpse of the Shura's saber. At times, it was firm and unstoppable, at times, it was continuous like water, at times, it was majestic, at times, it was sinister. Blood quencher drank all of the blood in Su Zimo's hands. The blood glow on the saber intensified, as though blood quencher was getting excited. In the town, some daring mortals could not hold it in any longer and secretly peeked through a crack in their doors, only to witness a scene that they would never forget for the rest of their lives. The immortals who were initially high and mighty and declared that they were going to wipe out Pingyang town were now fleeing wretchedly without any of the elegance of immortals. A green-robed man wielded a blood-colored saber and strolled leisurely on the long streets, leaving corpses behind him. Everywhere he passed, rivers of blood flowed. It was a complete massacre. Immortal slaying. Jining Jinjuan whose essence spirits and spirit energies were sealed were like fish on the chopping block in front of Su Zimo. The skies gradually brightened. Perfected Lord Yundu was sweating profusely as he buried his head to break the formations at the edge of Pingyang town. The ancient spirit lock and ancient god lock formations were extremely complicated and even with his capabilities, it was difficult for him to dispel them within a short period of time. Fortunately, this trapping formation with surging fog was not too difficult to break through. Perfected Lord Yundu was even more flustered when he heard the tragic cries behind him. However, he did not turn back to look. He must not be distracted. Their only chance of survival was to dispel the trap formation as soon as possible. Time passed bit by bit. After an unknown period of time, the fog dissipated. Perfected Lord Yundu heaved a sigh of relief and slumped to the ground, already drenched in sweat. The morning sun had just risen and a ray of light tore through the fog, illuminating the small town. Everything looked peaceful and peaceful. Suddenly, Perfected Lord Yundu felt that something was amiss. It was too quiet. Unknowingly, the cries, pleas for mercy and cries for help behind him had already vanished. Thud. Thud. Footsteps sounded. It was as though the person's feet were stained with some sort of sticky liquid as he walked on the stone path. The footsteps arrived behind him and disappeared suddenly. A chill ran down his spine. Perfected Lord Yundu did not dare to turn back. A blood-colored saber was slowly extended beneath his throat, emitting a thick stench of blood. The sharpness of the saber was bone-chilling. "You're the last." A voice sounded beside his ears. It was soft, indifferent and emotionless. Exclamation point. A flash of blood appeared. Perfected Lord Yundu's head fell and fresh blood splattered. His head rolled a few times on the ground before facing Pingyang town. His eyes widened. Green robes and bloody path. The two different colors stimulated his final senses. His consciousness gradually blurred and eventually dissipated. Chapter 631. The doors on both sides of the street opened gradually, revealing a gap. Many mortals mustered their courage and looked outside. However, they were shocked. Corpses were strewn all over the limestone road. At the end of the road, a green-robed man stood in a pool of blood. Beside him was a long saber that was filled with blood qi, as though he was a fiend celestial from hell. The man's gaze was calm as he gazed at the rising sun in the east, slightly lost in thought. The morning glow shone on the man's face, shining brilliantly as though it was plated with a layer of gold, making him look sacred and peaceful. For some reason, everyone's initially fearful and restless hearts calmed down. Shrouded in a Buddhist light, the man resembled a bodhisattva from hell who had come to deliver the masses. Two completely different auras gathered on the man's body, but they did not seem out of place. Turning around, the man waved his sleeves and swept up the corpses on both sides of the street. He returned to his residence and vanished. Granny, who is second young Master Su? In the dilapidated house, a child who had yet to shed his innocence asked curiously. Second young Master Su, the old woman murmured softly with a lost expression, as though she was lost in her memories. When the others in Pingyang town heard that name, they felt conflicted as well. The old woman said, "Do you remember someone that I mentioned to you just now? It's the person who was almost burned to death because he did not kneel to an immortal. It's him." The child was surprised. "Yes, it's him." The old woman nodded and sighed emotionally. That should have happened 20 to 30 years ago. Second young Master Su was bullied by immortals and his scholarly achievements were stripped away, reducing him to a lowly commoner. To think that today, in the residence, Su Zimo took away the storage bags of the 100 Jining Jinjuan and piled their corpses in a corner casually. Su Zimo went to the backyard and chopped down a few trees to make a coffin before returning to the peach blossom tree. Looking at the old man who seemed to be in deep sleep under the tree, Su Zimo's eyes were filled with deep longing and reluctance. After a long time, Su Zimo took a deep breath of air and went forward to carry the old man gently. He placed him in the coffin and buried him under the tree, covering him with soil. Su Zimo stood silently as he looked at the brand-new grave, feeling an unbearable stuffiness in his chest. All of a sudden, the peach blossom tree beside him swayed for a moment and tender sprouts appeared on the initially withered tree trunk. In the blink of an eye, buds bloomed one after another and bloomed silently. In this early winter, there was a hint of life and greenery in the residence. Flower petals gently drifted down, covering the entire tomb. The peach blossom tree swayed and emitted an emotion, as though it was consoling Su Zimo. Su Zimo caressed the tree trunk gently and smiled. "I'm fine." Upon hearing that, the peach blossom tree was delighted and its branches bent slightly, rubbing gently against Su Zimo's cheeks. It was not a. In this world, everything had spirituality. Even a lifeless rock could gain spirituality, let alone a peach blossom tree. Legend has it that a mighty figure with immense dermic powers cultivated on a rock all year round. Many years later, a life was born from the rock. Daiyu had once imparted the Tao beneath the peach blossom tree. Apart from Su Zimo obtaining the Tao, the peach blossom tree gained some benefits and gained spirituality as well. Later on, Su Zimo formed his core under the peach blossom tree and comprehended two Jin Dan phenomenons. The peach blossom tree gained sentience and started cultivating as well. "It's good that it gains spirituality," Su Zimo said. "With you in this town from now on, you'll be able to protect the citizens." All the tree branches trembled, as though they were nodding in agreement. Daiyu was the source of the peach blossom tree's sentience and its future accomplishments were unpredictable. The blood of Jining Jinjuan that seeped into the ground would become the source of energy for the peach blossom tree's cultivation. On the ground, the peach blossom tree was beautiful and fragrant. However, Su Zimo could clearly sense that there were gigantic roots in the depths of the ground that were expanding in all directions. The roots were powerful and menacing. They grew continuously and plundered all the life essence underground, gulping down the fresh blood that seeped into the ground. In this Pingyang town, no one could compete with it. Although the peach blossom tree was not tall and inconspicuous, its roots were massive and had already covered the entire Pingyang town. If its roots were to extend to Tsang Lang mountain range, Su Zimo pondered for a moment and said, "There are still 49 formation flags in Pingyang town that form an ancient formation. I'll leave the formation flags here instead of taking them away." The cultivation of the peach blossom tree was considered as a type of demon. The presence of the two ancient formations, spirit and spirit lock, would weaken the strength of cultivators tremendously. However, the impact on demons was not great. That way, it would be much easier for the peach blossom tree to protect Pingyang town. The massacre in Sung Lang mountain range was coming to an end as well. The air above the entire mountain range was filled with a thick blood stench. From afar, the mountains and rivers were dyed red in an extremely shocking manner. The three dynasties were completely defeated this time round. Without Jinying, the alliance army of the three dynasties could not defend against the devouring of the beast stampede. It was already extremely fortunate that a small portion of the hundreds of soldiers could escape alive. With that, the external threat of the Great Zhou dynasty was resolved. The Prince of Great Shang had once questioned Su Zimo as to why he had to make a move. Su Zimo replied that he had to kill and bury everyone because of the death of his kin. However, in reality, his true motive was to resolve the external threat of the Great Zhou dynasty and protect the people of Pingyang town. "It's time to leave." After standing still for a long time, Su Zimo murmured softly. The peach blossom tree swayed with a hint of reluctance. "I won't be able to see you again after this. Cultivate well." Su Zimo hardened his heart and sped into the distance without lingering. Before long, Su Zimo suddenly stopped in his tracks and looked down at a small valley that resembled a paradise. In this small valley, he buried a person with his own hands. Su Zimo's gaze shifted. Beside the grave, there was a person in ragged clothes sprawled on the ground. He was covered in dust and his hair was disheveled such that his appearance could not be seen clearly. Su Zimo landed beside the grave and walked over. The sound of his footsteps seemed to have alarmed that person. That person stood up suddenly and bared his teeth at Su Zimo, hollering, "Get lost! Get lost! My sister doesn't want to cultivate." "No." The moment their gazes met, both of them were stunned. Shen Nan. Su Zimo could barely recognize him. He was already old. His face was filled with wrinkles, his hair was gray and most of his teeth were gone. It had been close to 30 years. Su Zimo often could not sense the passage of time when he cultivated. However, when he saw Shen Nan again, a complicated emotion surged into his heart. He still looked like he was 17 or 18 years old. As for Shen Nan, he was already an old man with one foot in the grave. "Get lost! Get lost!" The confusion in Shen Nan's eyes paused for a moment before he became delirious again. He pounced in front of the grave at the side and hollered in shock and fear, "We don't want the immortal opportunity. My sister and I don't want to become immortals." Shen Nan had already gone mad. Although the two of them had a grudge in the past, it was no longer important at this moment. Su Zimo felt a sense of sadness. After cultivating for dozens of years, his old friends had left one after another. Shen Nan could be considered as his last old friend in the mortal world. This old friend was about to die of old age as well. Su Zimo sighed and left with a flick of his sleeves. He no longer had any worries and severed his ties with the mortal world to pursue the Tao alone. Chapter 632. Sung Lang City. The cultivator army of the Great Zhou dynasty was gathered and numbered in the hundreds of thousands. For the past 2 years, the Empress of Great Zhou had led the army to guard the borders and had never retreated. However, a month ago, the Empress of Great Zhou was injured and fainted. The borders were routed. The eldest prince took control of the cultivator army and retreated all the way to the north of Sung Lang mountain range, stopping in Sung Lang city temporarily. City Lord's residence. The various generals, commanders and Jinying of the Great Zhou dynasty were gathered in the main hall of the residence. The Empress of Great Zhou sat high up with a frosty expression. Although she was a woman, she exuded an iron-blooded killing aura that was not inferior to men. Ji Yaoshue's face was a little pale, as though she had not recovered from her injuries. At the front of the many Jining Jinjuan and generals, a purple-robed man stood with one hand behind his back. His black hair was like a waterfall, his eyes were deep and he had an extraordinary aura. Although the purple-robed man stood below, his aura was comparable to Ji Yaoshue's. The atmosphere in the main hall was extremely stifling. "We can't retreat." Ji Yaoshue had a resolute expression as she said word by word, "Once we retreat, it's a small matter of losing our territory. At that time, countless citizens of Great Zhou will be massacred by the three dynasties. As long as I, Ji Yaoshue, am in power, I will not allow that to happen." "Yaoshue, you're injured. Don't waste your energy on this. Leave everything to me." The purple-robed man below smiled faintly. Although he said those words of concern, there was no emotion in his eyes and he was unusually calm. The purple-robed man was the eldest prince who accompanied the army. Ji Yaoshue was unmoved and said in a deep voice, "I can leave it to you, but you have to promise me that you will guard Sanglang City and not retreat." "Guard Sanglang City?" The eldest prince smiled and asked instead, "The allied army of the three dynasties has millions of soldiers and is several times more than the Great Zhou dynasty. How should we guard it with a strong aura?" "Yaoshue, at times, you're still too confident." The eldest prince and Ji Yaoshue were at each other's throats, and their words were not polite at all. Perfected Lord Mingzhe stood behind Ji Yaoshue and frowned at the many generals and cultivators in the hall. "The situation doesn't seem right. Emperor, be careful." Perfected Lord Mingzhe secretly sent a voice transmission. "Yeah, we won't be able to hold on. I heard that the secret agent reported that the allied forces of the three dynasties have already arrived at Sanglang mountain range. After tonight, they will definitely cross the mountain range and advance towards Sanglang City. If we don't retreat now, we won't have another chance." The generals under the first prince's command whispered amongst themselves. Ji Yaoshue's expression was ice-cold as she listened to the discussions in the grand hall. She stared at the first prince and said slowly, "Since eldest brother is unable to guard Sanglang City, you should retreat. I will guard it personally." He. The eldest prince smiled leisurely and asked, "Yaoshue, do you really insist on doing this?" "Not bad." Ji Yaoshue's tone was firm and unshakable. The first prince put away his smile and said coldly, "Then don't blame me for being rude." Ji Yaoshue narrowed her eyes and asked, "What do you want?" "Nothing." The first prince sneered and killing intent flashed through his eyes. "Since you insist on doing things your own way, I'll replace you." The moment he said that, the entire grand hall went silent. Ji Yaoshue's expression changed and she bolted upright. However, her body swayed and she nearly fell. Perfected Lord Mingzhe supported her hurriedly and turned to look at the first prince with a sharp gaze, questioning, "First prince, are you trying to force the first prince to abdicate?" "Force the first prince to abdicate?" The first prince reared his head in laughter with a menacing gaze and shouted, "That position did not belong to her to begin with. I'm the eldest son of my father's first wife. The position of the empress belongs to me to begin with." Ji Yaoshue was flustered and her old injuries acted up. She spat out a mouthful of blood and her face turned even paler. Ji Yaoshue clutched her chest and smiled bitterly. "You finally said those words. How can a woman be fit to be the empress? There's no such logic in this world since the ancient times." The first prince sneered once more. A look of arrogance flashed through Ji Yaoshue's eyes as she pushed perfected Lord Mingzhe away and stood upright. "First, I had no intention of fighting with you. However, since you look down on women, I'll have to fight for it. How many people will follow you if you want to force the first prince to abdicate?" Ji Yaoshue hollered and exuded the authority of the empress. She surveyed her surroundings with a burning gaze and many generals and commanders lowered their heads, not daring to meet her gaze. Naturally, the many Jining Jinjuan in the Grand Hall were unafraid of the authority of the Empress as they lowered their heads with calm expressions. Ji Yaoshua's heart skipped a beat when she saw the reactions of everyone in the Grand Hall. The military must have changed during the month that she was unconscious. Fu. The first prince laughed with a mocking look in his eyes. Ji Yaoshua, for the past 20 years, Great Zhou has been in turmoil ever since you ascended to the position of the Empress. How many people do you think will follow you? Oh, right. I've got to remind you that if nothing goes wrong, second and fourth should have already spoken to father to have you crippled. A commotion broke out in the Grand Hall. What do you want? Ji Yaoshua asked coldly. It's not appropriate for Great Zhou to go head-on against the alliance of the three dynasties, and we should prioritize peace. As for the conditions. The first prince paused for a moment and looked at Ji Yaoshua with a fake smile. I'll have to trouble you to visit the three dynasties as a guest, sister. How dare you? Perfected Lord Mingzhe was enraged and hollered, you're thinking of offering up the current empress? Furthermore, she's your sister. Do you have any kinship in your heart? There's no such thing as kinship in the royal family, the first prince said coldly with a cold expression. I believe that as long as the three dynasties retreat, father won't blame me even if I have to hand you over. Ji Yaoshua did not say anything. Instead of anger, her heart was filled with sorrow. She had not expected those words to come from her closest kin. Traitor, you deserve death. Perfected Lord Mingzhe waved his sleeves and a flying sword shot out towards the first prince's glabella. However, the first prince did not move and his expression was unchanged. Clang! Another flying sword pierced through the air and repelled Perfected Lord Mingzhe's flying sword. Two Jining Jinjuan stood out and shielded the first prince behind them, glaring at Perfected Lord Mingzhe coldly. Yong Yan, Jing Shan, the two of you. Perfected Lord Mingzhe looked at the two of them in disbelief. Mingzhe, a fine bird chooses a fine tree to nest in. Handing over Ji Yaoshua might be the only way for the alliance army to retreat, Perfected Lord Yong Yan said. That's preposterous. Perfected Lord Mingzhe grit his teeth. A method like that will only embarrass the great Zhou dynasty. The alliance army is attacking with a ferocious aura. How can they retreat so easily? You guys. Perfected Lord Jing Shan interrupted, a wise man submits to circumstances. Mingzhe, we don't want to be enemies with you. You don't have a chance. Back down. You guys are turning a blind eye to the emperor's predicament. Perfected Lord Mingzhe turned around and looked at the other Jining Jinjuan in the hall. Most of them avoided him and a small number of them chose to stand behind the first prince directly. Senior Mingzhe, now that things have come to this, you don't have to bother about me. Ji Yaoshua was completely disheartened and said softly, you just have to return and report to father that even if I die, I won't fall into the hands of the three dynasties and be humiliated. Ha 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 ha. When the first prince saw that the outcome was set, he could not help but burst into laughter. Sister, don't blame me for being ruthless. Blame yourself for being born in the royal family of the great Zhou dynasty and for fighting with me for the position of the emperor. Before his laughter ended, a change happened. Chapter 633. Suddenly, the tiles of the grand hall cracked. A dark beam of light descended at an extremely fast speed and descended into the crowd in the blink of an eye. At that moment, the atmosphere in the grand hall was tense. Although there were many cultivators in the grand hall and many Jining Jinjuan were present, none of them managed to react to the sudden appearance of the dark beam of light. Watch out! Who's there? The crowd dispersed. The dark beam of light was nailed to the ground. It was an arrow. It was so powerful that the tail of the arrow was still trembling slightly even after it was half buried into the ground. Everyone focused their gazes. There were as many as 6 spirit patterns etched on the body of the black gold arrow. It's a Khanate spirit weapon. No wonder it's so fast. Many Jiningjinjuan in the Grand Hall felt a lingering fear. Given the situation earlier on, if that arrow was aimed at any one of them, they would not have been able to dodge it and would have died on the spot. The Grand Hall was in chaos and there was only one person who did not move. It was the eldest prince. The eldest prince's motionless figure stood out in the crowd. Everyone's gazes landed on the eldest prince and could not help but shudder. Their eyes widened in disbelief. A bloodied hole appeared on the eldest prince's head in a shocking manner. The eldest prince was dead. His head was pierced by an arrow. Instantly, the Grand Hall fell into a momentary silence. Immediately after, Perfected Lord Jing Shan and Perfected Lord Yong Yen were enraged. Killing intent burst forth from their eyes as they said coldly, "Where did this thief come from? How dare he take the life of a prince of Great Zhou?" Boom! Perfected Lord Jing Shan flicked his sleeves and attacked. A gigantic hole appeared on the roof of the Grand Hall. It was empty. The person who attacked had already left. "Everyone, listen to my orders." Perfected Lord Jing Shan calmed down and said in a deep voice, "That person's weapon is a spirit weapon and his cultivation realm is only Jin Dan's. He's definitely not out of Tsanglang City yet. Troops, listen up. Hunt him down in the entire city. Report." Right then, a hurried voice sounded from outside the Grand Hall. A strong renovation soldier sprinted over, drenched in sweat and panting. He looked extremely excited but there was a hint of fear in the depths of his eyes. "Report." "Reporting." The strong renovation worker directly rushed into the main hall. He was out of breath and shouted repeatedly. True Monarch Yong Yen berated, "Whatever it is, put it aside for now. There's a military report from the front line. Emergency." Huff, huff. Emergency military report. The strong renovation worker gasped for breath and said intermittently. The expressions of everyone in the hall changed. Could it be that the allied forces of the three dynasties did not rest last night and chose to cross the Tsanglang mountain range? Ah! In that case, the allied forces of the three dynasties should have already arrived at Tsanglang City. The crowd was in a state of chaos. Quiet. At this moment, Ji Yaoshue's voice rang out. It was filled with the majesty of the emperor, and it drowned out the clamor of the crowd. Ji Yaoshue asked in a deep voice, "Tell me, what happened?" The strong renovator had already caught his breath and said, "Last night, the allied forces of the three dynasties did not set up camp. Instead, they chose to cross the Tsanglang mountain range." Hearing this, the hearts of everyone in the hall gradually sank to the bottom. Jean Lu paused for a moment and changed the topic. "However, a beast tide has erupted in Tsanglang mountain range." "What? Beast tide? How is that possible?" A series of exclamations sounded from the crowd. Perfected Lord Mingzhe had a calm expression and said in a deep voice, "From what I know, there are no fiend demons in Tsanglang mountain range. Even if a beast tide had erupted, it shouldn't have been able to shake the allied forces of the three dynasties." The strong renovator gulped and continued, "The allied forces of the three dynasties are almost completely wiped out. Out of the millions of troops, only a few 100,000 managed to escape. They were utterly defeated. The three princes are dead and the allied forces of the three dynasties have been defeated. They have already retreated." There was complete silence in the hall, not a single sound could be heard. Completely wiped out. The three princes were dead. The news was so shocking that everyone had forgotten that just now, a prince of Great Zhou was shot to death by an arrow. The heavens have blessed Great Zhou. Many generals and commanders knelt on the ground and shouted emotionally. Ji Yaoshue frowned slightly in deep thought. The lips of the cultivator quivered, as though he wanted to say something but hesitated. Perfected Lord Mingzhe frowned. Although this was a joyous occasion, there were still many doubts. There were more than 100 Jiningjinjuan in the allied forces of the three dynasties. Where are they? Perfected Lord Mingzhe asked once more. A look of fear flashed through the eyes of the burly man as he replied with a quivering voice, All of them are dead. All of them are dead. Perfected Lord Mingzhe shuddered and asked, Are the fiend demons born in Sung Lang mountain range that powerful? There are no fiend demons, the burly man shook his head. The beast tied in Sung Lang mountain range was triggered by a single person. Later on, more than 100 Jinying Jinjuan chased after that person and arrived at a small town. Suddenly, a thick fog rose from the small town. By the time the fog dissipated, all of the Jinying Jinjuan were dead without a single survivor. The hall went silent once more. Everyone was shocked and confused. A single person could command thousands of demons and trigger such a terrifying beast tied to engulf the allied forces of the three dynasties? Or was that a ferocious beast in human form? Why did that ferocious beast in human form end up in a town? There was even a fog in the town. Later on, more than 100 Jinying Jinjuan were dead. All of these things sounded very strange. Perfected Lord Mingzhe pondered for a moment and asked, Why did that person stop the allied forces of the three dynasties? The burly man replied, His kin passed away and coincidentally, the allied forces of the three dynasties invaded. In his rage, he went on a killing spree and triggered a beast tide, declaring that he wanted everyone to die with him. When she heard that, Ji Yaoshue seemed to have thought of something and shuddered. Ignoring her injuries, she ran out of the hall and looked into the distance. Perfected Lord Mingzhe's gaze was sharp as he asked again, What's that person's name? I think it's Su Zimo. Pust. Everyone in the hall gasped and their expressions changed when they heard that name. Su Zimo, the strongest monster incarnate in history 20 years ago. Back in the Great Qian ruins, he defeated all the paragons of the North region and incinerated their nascent souls, dyeing half the skies red. 20 years had passed, and this name had almost been forgotten by people. To think that it would be mentioned once more today. Impossible. Perfected Lord Jing Shan said resolutely, Everyone knows that Su Zimo leaped into the Dragon Burial Valley. How can he still be alive? Perfected Lord Mingzhe was in disbelief as well. However, he knew that if there was anyone in this world who could do something as such, it would most likely be Su Zimo. I heard that Su Zimo used a Khanate spirit weapon, the black gold arrow, in the battle between the paragons of the North region 20 years ago, a cultivator in the crowd whispered. There were rumors about the relationship between Ji Yaoshue and Su Zimo in the Great Zhou dynasty. Everyone was enlightened. If those rumors were true, that arrow that killed the eldest prince was a show of might. There was no chance for excuses. He was killed straight away. With the defeat of the alliance army of the three dynasties and the death of the eldest prince, who would dare to target Ji Yaoshue again? None of the Jinying Jinjuan in the hall, including the Jinying Jinjuan of the two princes, Jing Shan and Yong Yen, dared to cause trouble for Su Zimo. Now that more than 100 Jinying Jinjuan of the three dynasties were dead, who would dare to provoke him? There were only 5 words left in Perfected Lord Mingzhe's mind. A single arrow determined the fate of the universe. To think that the methods of that young man would be even more frightening after 20 years. Chapter 634. Outside the main hall. Ji Yaoshue gazed into the distance with a forlorn expression and a hint of disappointment in her eyes. There was nothing there. Just now, that person had already left. Perfected Lord Mingzhe arrived beside Ji Yaoshue and asked curiously, You knew that he wasn't dead, Empress? That's right. I knew 15 years ago, 15 years ago. Perfected Lord Mingzhe froze for a moment and frowned in deep thought. A moment later, he shuddered and blurted out, Dragon Burial Valley, that middle-aged monk. Ji Yaoshue nodded. It's no wonder why that monk risked his life to save you back then and even escorted you all the way. Perfected Lord Mingzhe lamented internally, that monk was decisive in killing and his attacks were swift. His thought process was chilling and didn't seem like someone from the Buddhist monasteries. Back then, I had a feeling that the monk's methods were similar to someone else's. To think that it was truly him. When perfected Lord Mingzhe saw that Ji Yaoshue was silent, he knew that what happened today was a huge blow to this child. The betrayal of a loved one wasn't something that everyone could accept. The sudden departure of that person must have affected her greatly as well. Not knowing how to console her, perfected Lord Mingzhe asked, "Why did he choose to avoid meeting you?" "He was afraid of implicating me and Great Zhou." Ji Yaoshue asked softly, "Senior Mingzhe, do you really think that the reason why he started the beast stampede and went on a killing spree was because of the death of his loved one? Isn't that the case?" Perfected Lord Mingzhe froze for a moment. "Of course not," Ji Yaoshue shook her head. Perfected Lord Mingzhe frowned and asked, "Then why would he say that?" Ji Yaoshue replied, "That's the only way he can have nothing to do with me or Great Zhou. That's the only way the major sects and factions won't vent their anger on Great Zhou." Perfected Lord Mingzhe was enlightened. Su Zimo's identity was way too sensitive. He had offended way too many factions 20 years ago. There was utterly no place for him in the northern region. Given the situation back then, not to mention Su Zimo himself, whoever dared to take in Su Zimo's brother would face imminent disaster. It was one thing for Su Zimo to die at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley. Now that he had returned alive, he would definitely have to face the pursuit of the 10 upper sects, for gentry clans, Glass Palace and other major factions. Only by severing all ties with the Great Zhou dynasty would he not implicate the Great Zhou dynasty. It would not be long before news of this battle in Sung Lang mountain range spread throughout the entire northern region. At that time, regardless of whether they had any grudges with Su Zimo, countless sects, forces, and cultivators would join in the pursuit. That was because Su Zimo had the divine phoenix bone and many secret techniques. Whoever obtained Su Zimo's items would replace him and become the new eternal monster. Heroes vying for supremacy. Su Zimo was that dear. Perfected Lord Mingzhe sighed gently. It's been hard on him. Perfected Lord Mingzhe knew that from this day forth, Su Zimo would bear the infamy of killing indiscriminately, being cruel and a fiend. Nobody would be grateful to him. That was because everyone would only think that Su Zimo was a cruel and violent demon whose hands were stained with the blood of countless humans for the sake of venting his personal grievances. Those who were not of the same race would be punished by the world. Ji Yaoshue could vaguely sense that the two of them would probably never meet again after this parting. "Empress, let's return," perfected Lord Mingzhe said softly. "The Great Zhou dynasty has no more worries now that the 3 dynasties have retreated. I believe that no one in the Great Zhou dynasty will doubt you from today onwards." Ji Yaoshue sighed and turned to leave. Due to the passing of his kin, Su Zimo appeared and launched a beast stampede, killing millions of cultivators and hundreds of Jining Jinjuan. That news swept through the entire north region like a storm. It caused a huge uproar in the cultivation world of the north region. How is that possible? Everyone witnessed him jumping into the Dragon Burial Valley 20 years ago. To think that he's still alive. Millions of cultivators. What a ruthless method. I heard that he hasn't cultivated to the level of a fiend demon yet. How did Jining Jinjuan kill hundreds of them? Could his strength have already reached such a terrifying level? It seems like Jining Jinjuan was ambushed and his spirit energy and essence spirit were sealed. Is this a declaration of war against the human race? Every cultivator in the north region was discussing this matter. Initially, the cultivation world had calmed down with the impending opening of the intermediate ancient battlefield. All the major sects and factions were preparing to send their disciples into the ancient battlefield. To think that the north region would be shaken by the news. There was an obvious increase in cultivators in the Great Zhou dynasty. All the major sects and factions took action, wanting to locate Su Zimo as soon as possible. Cultivators from the 10 upper sects, 4 gentry clans, 2 ancient aristocratic families and even super sects of Tianhuang mainland such as Glass Palace and Malevolent Earth sect appeared to search for Su Zimo. Under such circumstances, it was almost impossible for Su Zimo to hide. However, no one discovered Su Zimo for 10 consecutive days. In fact, the Dharma Dao Jun was even alarmed during this period of time. It was said that a Dao Lord of Glass Palace had ascended Misty Peak personally to capture Su Zimo, but to no avail. Powerful spirit consciousnesses would sweep through the capital of Great Zhou daily, scanning every single corner of the capital. It was as though Su Zimo had vanished from the face of the earth. Nobody knew of his whereabouts. Right then, a spirit crane that flew over from the vicinity of Glass Palace caused a huge uproar once more. There was a message written on it. You guys had better not send any cultivators into the ancient battlefield. Otherwise, I'll kill every single one I see. 13 cities of Yen country, an eye for an eye. There were 3 words written on it, Su Zimo. The fact that no cultivators of Glass Palace stood out to deny it meant that it was most likely true. The news spread rapidly and caused an uproar. To think that someone would dare to threaten Glass Palace in this world. This was a declaration of war. A perfected being of Jin Dan was declaring war against this behemoth of Tianhuang mainland that had a legacy of time. No one could match that sharpness. There were no schemes or schemes. There was only an open declaration of war. He was threatening Glass Palace in front of the entire cultivation world. If you dare to send anyone into the ancient battlefield, Su Zimo will kill all of you. 13 cities of Yen country, an eye for an eye. A full 20 years had passed. Nobody expected Su Zimo to still be alive. Less than that, nobody expected this monster incarnate to declare war against Glass Palace in such a domineering manner the moment he reappeared. It was as though he was trampling on Glass Palace's face. The entire cultivation world was in an uproar as discussions broke out. Overly rigid means easy to break. This lad's sharpness is exposed. How dare a spirit demon of the Jin Dan realm challenge Glass Palace? He must have a death wish. You're wrong. In my opinion, he's very smart. Oh. What do you mean? If that lad were to charge into Glass Palace directly, he would be courting death. However, he's very smart and chose to fight in the ancient battlefield. So what? 20 years ago, this lad killed Shiwuya and was the true number 1 of the North region. There's a suppression of cultivation in the ancient battlefield. In the Jin Dan realm, he's the heavens. Huan Glass Palace is a match for him. That might not be the case. Don't forget that this lad's Jin Dan was crippled completely by a void reversion. There's no doubt about that. During the battle in Songlang mountain range, this lad did not have any spirit energy either. In my opinion, his strength has decreased instead. Chapter 635. Su Zimo declared war on Glass Palace. The various major sects, factions, and cultivators all had different opinions regarding this matter. Some people felt that Su Zimo was at his peak after surviving a calamity and returning to kill millions of cultivators. There were also people who felt that Su Zimo was reckless and arrogant. His actions were no different from an ant trying to shake a tree. Even if his physique was strong, his bloodline was shocking and his melee combat strength was terrifying. However, it was undeniable that his Jin Dan was crippled. That was the truth. There was no way a void reversion would fail if he took action personally 20 years ago. There was no way he could repair the destroyed Jin Dan as well. Furthermore, none of the cultivators who survived the battle at Songlang mountain range sensed any spirit energy fluctuation from Su Zimo's body. The destruction of Jin Dan meant that there was no more Jin Dan phenomenon. In the opinion of some people, Su Zimo who had lost his Jin Dan might not be able to win against the peerless paragons of Glass Palace who were at the Jin Dan realm. Furthermore, there were sealers in the intermediate ancient battlefield as well. Glass Palace had a long history and a strong foundation as an immortal sect. How could they be frightened by a single spirit crane from Su Zimo? There was bound to be a fierce battle in the ancient battlefield. Glass Palace prepared for the battle while searching for Su Zimo's whereabouts. They even offered a high bounty. Unfortunately, there was still no news of Su Zimo after another 20 days. The day of the ancient battlefield's opening approached gradually. Bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, a quiet old temple. In the courtyard, there were two people and a fox. A young monk assumed a lotus position and faced the morning sun with a lowered gaze, chanting sutras and paying respects to Buddha. Bathed in the sunlight, he seemed to be shrouded in a layer of Buddhist light. On the other side, a green-robed scholar laid casually on a stone bench with his hands behind his head. He seemed to be resting with his eyes closed in an indescribably leisurely manner. On the green-robed scholar's body, there was a little fiery red fox that was jumping around and having fun. Old temple, monk, scholar, fox, Sanskrit chants, everything seemed like a scene from a painting. The monk was Mingzhen. The scholar was naturally Su Zimo, who had stirred up a storm in the northern region. An old monk walked out of the grand hall. Mingzhen, Ming Xan, get ready. The primordial battlefield is about to open. Let me tell you about the origins of this Jin Dan phenomenon ranking. Su Zimo and Li Wuyo hurriedly got up and sat upright. In ancient times, the human race rose to power and fought against the ancient 9 races. In order to select the most promising members of the younger generation and nurture them to ensure the continuity of the human race, the ancient expert Fairy Linglong established this ranking, and it has been passed down ever since. Therefore, this list has a strict age requirement. Those who are over 200 years old will not be able to enter this list. Hearing this, Su Zimo nodded. Back then, this list was created to gather the geniuses of the human race. Naturally, there was a strict age limit. To Taoist master Jin Dan, who had a lifespan of 500 years, 200 years was definitely considered young. Su Zimo couldn't help but think of a person. The number 1 of the previous phenomenon ranking, Di'in. 100 years ago, that person had already obtained the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking in his 30s. The reason why he entered the primordial battlefield this time round was because he wanted to take the number 1 spot twice in a row. Fairy Linglong has already transcended the tribulations and ascended. Right now, the Jin Dan phenomenon ranking is published by Enigma Palace, which she founded. At that point, the old monk paused for a moment. 9 immortal sects, 8 demon races, 7 fiend sects, 6 Buddhist monasteries, 5 heretical doctrines, 4 unorthodox groups, 3 aristocratic families, 2 islands, and 1 palace. These were the top factions in Tianhuang mainland right now. Enigma Palace was probably the only faction that was qualified to publish the Jin Dan phenomenon ranking in the primordial battlefield. Enigma Palace? Su Zimo's gaze flickered as he murmured softly. A pale, beardless, slightly plump Taoist priest with a folding fan appeared in his mind. Su Zimo lamented internally, Enigma Palace, Lin Xuanji. I wonder if the two of them are related. After pondering for a moment, Su Zimo asked, Fairy Linglong must have been one of the ancient emperors in the past for her to possess such influence and gather all the monster incarnates in the world, right? Although Fairy Linglong was an ancient expert, she was not an emperor. The old monk shook his head. However, Fairy Linglong had another identity. She was the wife of the human emperor. The wife of the human emperor. That was enough. Furthermore, the fact that she was able to establish Enigma Palace, leave behind her legacy was proof that Fairy Linglong was not weak in the past. The old monk continued, Enigma Palace has an extremely special status in the cultivation world and is revered by the immortal, Buddhist and fiend sections. That's one of the reasons why. Because the human emperor did not leave behind his legacy, Enigma Palace is the only sect that has anything to do with him. Apart from the phenomenon ranking, Enigma Palace has 2 other rankings, the Dharma characteristic ranking and the divine power ranking. Those are the famous Enigma rankings of the cultivation world. Mingzhen asked curiously with a lost expression, Master, apart from being famous, what's the use of being on the phenomenon ranking? If it's just to be famous, I won't fight with them. In Mingzhen's heart, he would rather recite sutras and worship Buddha quietly than fight to the death with others. Of course, it's not just about being famous, the old monk smiled. Any cultivator who can make it onto the phenomenon ranking will be known by the world and will naturally be noticed by the various supersections. For example, if you can make it onto the phenomenon ranking, you'll have a chance to join the 6 Buddhist monasteries. I don't want to join the other monasteries. I just want to accompany you, Master. Mingzhen shook his head. Don't be impulsive, the old monk said earnestly, this is a rare opportunity. You'll only be able to go further if you learn about the strengths of the other sections. Cultivation isn't about being in seclusion and standing aloof from worldly affairs. You're still young and have to head out eventually to experience the hardships of the mortal world. You'll have to experience the vicissitudes of life and experience the fickleness of human nature. That's the true meaning of cultivation, the old monk said, you can only leave the world after entering it. Mingzhen was a little lost and nodded his head in confusion. He was inexperienced and had almost never left the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley, there was no way he would know such things. However, he could tell that the old monk was about to chase him away. Mingzhen felt a little disappointed. Su Zimo glanced at the old monk and sighed internally. He was probably the only one who understood the other layer of meaning behind the old monk's words. The old monk was trying to find a way out for Mingzhen. The old monk was old and he knew that he would leave this world one day. That was the reason why he wanted Mingzhen to join another sect. That way, he would be able to obtain the protection of that super sect as well. At that thought, Su Zimo laughed self-deprecatingly. He had offended the various major factions of the North region. There was no place for him in the North region. Even the other sects and factions would not take him in. That was because everyone thought that he was a demon. Humans and demons were different. As though he could see the loneliness in Su Zimo's eyes, the old monk said warmly, apart from the chance to join the various supersects, there will also be rewards for leaving your name on the phenomenon ranking. The higher your ranking, the better the rewards. It could be an earth-grade dermic art, a cultivation technique, a supreme grade or perfect dermic weapon. In fact, there's even a small chance that it could be a connate dermic weapon. Chapter 636. After forming a core, cultivators would undergo a complete transformation and break free from the shackles of heaven and earth for the first time. Not only would they be able to fly, their lifespan would also increase to 500 years. It could be said that core formation was a watershed in the path of cultivation. The difference between the Jin Dan realm and nascent soul realm was yet another massive watershed. That was because after entering the nascent soul realm, one would cultivate an essence spirit and break free from the shackles of heaven and earth once more, extending one's lifespan to 1,000 years. With an essence spirit, it meant that cultivators could utilize dermic powers for their own use. At the same time, it meant that cultivators would need new dermic arts, weapons, and even secret cultivation techniques for spirit refinement. To put it simply, the intermediate ancient battlefield was a preparation for the many paragons of the Jin Dan realm after advancing to the nascent soul realm. The old monk said, before this, there were even heaven-grade dermic arts and cultivation techniques that appeared as rewards for the number 1 of the phenomenon ranking. When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he was secretly shocked. After cultivating to the nascent soul realm, one would see another world and come into contact with another level. Dermic powers were also the powers of heaven and earth. Dermic arts, cultivation techniques and dermic arts had differences in quality. Therefore, in the cultivation world, dermic arts, cultivation techniques and dermic arts were divided into 4 grades according to heaven, earth, mystic and yellow. Heaven-grade dermic arts that could release the strongest and most terrifying dermic arts were heaven-grade dermic arts. Thereafter, they would decrease. The weakest dermic arts were yellow-grade dermic arts. Of course, even yellow-grade dermic arts had differences in quality. Furthermore, In the cultivation world, most of the common yellow-grade dharmic arts and cultivation techniques were possessed by various major sects and factions. Mystic-grade dharmic arts and cultivation techniques could only be passed down by aristocratic families and major cultivation clans. Earth-grade dharmic arts and cultivation techniques could only be possessed by the various super sects of Tianhuang mainland. As for heaven-grade dharmic arts and cultivation techniques, they were something that could only be chanced upon. In the ancient era, the emperors rose together and paragons roamed freely, creating many heaven-grade dharmic arts and cultivation techniques. By now, there were not many left. Furthermore, many of the legacies were incomplete. That was the reason why the paragons of Tianhuang mainland were scrambling for the intermediate ancient battlefield. That was the reason why Diyin wanted to enter the ancient battlefield once more despite suppressing his cultivation. For example, Su Zimo's Daming Seal was originally an earth-rank spell. However, due to the loss of the Mingwang prayer beads, there were only 4 Dharma seals left. Now, the Daming Dharma seal could only be considered a profound-level Dharma spell. Strictly speaking, the Demon Vanquishing Seal, Demon Subduing Seal, Immortal Trap Seal, and Immovable Foundation Seal were all mystic-level spells. When combined with the Daming Mantra, it was only a high-grade mystic-level spell. In the Daming Dharma seals, only the lost Great Vajra Will Seal and the Great Sumru Mountain Seal were the most powerful. Only then were they worthy of being earth-rank spells. However, the strange thing was that it was clearly recorded in the ancient books of the Daming Temple that the Daming True Scripture was a heaven-ranked spell. Even if he found the 2 lost seals, the Daming Seal was only an earth-level spell. After combining with the Daming Mantra to form the Daming True Scripture, it would actually become a heaven-level spell? That was something that Su Zimo could not figure out no matter how he thought about it. Of course, for Jining Jinjuan, even if he obtained the heaven-level Dharma spell, he would not be able to release it. Heaven-level Dharma spells had way too high a requirement for one's essence spirit. Even if Jining Jinjuan burned his essence spirit, he would not be able to release heaven-level Dharma spells. In theory, anyone could cultivate heaven-level Dharma spells as long as they were at nascent soul realm. However, heaven-level Dharma spells were difficult to understand. Jining Jinjuan had just cultivated his essence spirit and knew nothing about this level. It was extremely difficult to cultivate them. Of course, the benefits of cultivating heaven-level Dharma spells were obvious as well. At the same cultivation realm, an essence spirit that cultivated a heaven-level Dharma spell would be much stronger than the essence spirits of other perfected lords. The old monk continued, after entering nascent soul realm, you'll have to change your weapons. Even if you're wielding Khanate spirit weapons, you won't be able to release the power of Dharma spells. In terms of the toughness of Khanate spirit weapons, even ordinary dharmic weapons would find it difficult to shatter them. However, Khanate spirit weapons were only at the level of spirit energy. There are 4 types of dharmic weapons that correspond to different realms. It's extremely simple. The weapons used by Jining Jinjuan are perfected Lord dharmic weapons. The weapons used by void reversions are Dao being dharmic weapons. And so on. The Dharma Dao Jun wields Dao Lord dharmic weapons and Conjoint Body Mighty Figures wields Mighty Figure dharmic weapons. When he heard that, Su Zimo's heart skipped a beat and he asked instinctively, above the Conjoint Body realm is the Mahayana realm where they're addressed as patriarchs. Are Mahayana patriarchs using patriarch dharmic weapons? Wrong, the old monk smiled. The weapons used by Mahayana patriarchs are dharmic treasures. Dharmic treasures? Both Su Zimo and Su Zimo were stunned. That was an unfamiliar term for them. The old monk said, the logic behind it is simple. Above spirit energy is dharmic power and above dharmic power is the power of divine powers. Above spirit arts are dharmic arts and above dharmic arts are divine powers. Correspondingly, above spirit weapons are dharmic weapons and above dharmic weapons are dharmic treasures. The reason why one has to change weapons after reaching a certain realm is because one's strength will undergo a qualitative change as their cultivation increases. If dharmic power is injected into a spirit weapon, it will explode. Similarly, dermic weapons can't withstand the power of divine powers. Dermic weapons that have been baptized by the power of divine powers are dermic treasures. When he heard that, Su Zimo was enlightened. Be it perfected Lord dermic weapons or Tao being dermic weapons, their grades are the same as spirit weapons, the old monk continued, an inferior grade perfected Lord dermic weapon with a single dermic pattern, a middle grade perfected Lord dermic weapon with 2 dermic patterns, superior grade with 3 dermic patterns, supreme grade with 4 dermic patterns, perfect with 5 dermic patterns and connate with 6 dermic patterns. You guys know all of that? Su Zimo nodded. He was a weapon refinement master to begin with and naturally knew about that. Pausing for a moment, the old monk took a deep breath of air and said, "What I want to talk about is something else. If you guys can successfully advance to nascent soul realm, you'll be able to cultivate an essence spirit and every Jining Jinjuan will have a chance to refine a destiny dermic weapon of their own." Destiny dermic weapon. Both of them were invigorated. Su Zimo asked, "What's a destiny dermic weapon?" A destiny dermic weapon is a dermic weapon that is closely connected to your essence spirit. You have to use your essence spirit to refine it day and night. Over time, an extremely close connection will be established between you and the dermic weapon and it will be like a part of your body. The old monk explained, a destiny dermic weapon can unleash your greatest strength. When he heard that, Su Zimo frowned. If that was the case, there was nothing special about a destiny dermic weapon. The old monk continued, the true strength of a destiny dermic artifact lies in the fact that it will become stronger as your cultivation increases. Su Zimo's eyes shone brightly as he vaguely realized something. A look of admiration appeared in the old monk's eyes as he nodded. If you choose a superior grade perfected Lord dermic weapon at the beginning, your destiny dermic weapon will be upgraded to the level of a Tao being dermic weapon after the refinement of your essence spirit when you cultivate to the void reversion realm. Furthermore, it will be a superior grade 3 patterned one. Indeed. Su Zimo nodded and thought to himself, that's impressive. This meant that the grade of a destiny dermic weapon would not change even if it was upgraded. In other words, if Su Zimo chose a connate perfected Lord dermic weapon as his destiny dermic weapon, it would transform into a Tao being dermic weapon when he cultivated to the void reversion realm. Its grade would still be connate. Chapter 637. The old monk said, it's naturally best if you can obtain a connate dermic weapon for a destiny dermic weapon. Apart from that, perfect and supreme grade dermic weapons are acceptable as well. Su Zimo nodded. After all, connate dermic weapons were way too rare and could only be chanced upon by luck. The old monk continued, apart from the rich spirit qi in the intermediate ancient battlefield, there are also 2 types of spirit herbs that are extinct in Tianhuang mainland, the spirit-gathering fruit and soul-nourishing blood ginseng. It's extremely dangerous for perfected Jin Dan to break through to the nascent soul realm. In the best-case scenario, his cultivation would be crippled and in the worst-case scenario, he would die on the spot without a corpse. The spirit-gathering fruit is used to help perfected Jin Dan condense his essence spirit during his breakthrough. You only have to consume a single spirit-gathering fruit. Consuming more than that is useless. After cultivators become Jining Jinjuan, they can consume the soul-nourishing blood ginseng to increase their cultivation speed and nourish and strengthen their essence spirits. It's a rare spirit material. Naturally, the more soul-nourishing blood ginseng, the better. Su Zimo roughly understood. Apart from the numerous opportunities, the intermediate ancient battlefield also contained unimaginable cultivation resources. If he could obtain sufficient benefits from it, his future cultivation path would be much smoother. Of course, the intermediate ancient battlefield is filled with danger as well. In fact, it's 10 times more dangerous than the elementary battlefield that you've experienced. The old monk said sternly, you've made too many enemies and have to be careful. In addition, there will be demons from Tianhuang mainland who will enter the intermediate ancient battlefield. Demons? Su Zimo froze for a moment. The old monk nodded. After forming a core, demons will also condense their essence spirits. Therefore, when demons enter, they will fight for the spirit-gathering fruit and soul-nourishing blood ginseng as well. When he heard that, Su Zimo came to a realization. In the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the Great Wilderness, the Yin spirit section came after the core formation section. In reality, the Yin spirit was similar to Jining Jinjuan's essence spirit. After demons cultivate their Yin spirits, they would become fiend demons that could take on human form and speak in human tongue. Even their demonic chi would be concealed such that even cultivators would find it difficult to distinguish them. After cultivating their Yin spirits, demons could control dermic powers as well. Once it was released, it would be a legendary demonic technique. The old monk said, "Ordinary demons can't threaten you." However, in Tianhuang mainland, there are 8 regions where the 8 major demon races reside and they occupy a large area. Those are the 8 demon regions. There are many terrifying birds and beasts in the 8 regions. Only those who have experienced countless bloody battles and an extraordinary bloodline can stand out. You have to be careful. Disciple will bear that in mind. Su Zimo nodded. There's nothing else. The old monk walked down the stone steps and stared at a spot in the void. His eyes lit up and he suddenly reached out with his withered hand and gently patted the void. Boom! A loud explosion resounded in the void. Under the gazes of Su Zimo and Li Wuyo, this area of the void actually shattered and collapsed deeply, slowly forming a pitch-black vortex. It was unknown where this vortex led to. At the other end, an ancient and desolate aura was faintly emitted. The old monk turned to Su Zimo and asked, "Are you planning to leave the north region this time round?" "Yes." Su Zimo did not hide anything. His brother was already dead and he no longer had any attachments in the mortal world. Most of his concerns were with Xiaoning. Furthermore, the north region could no longer accommodate him. If he continued staying in the north region, he might implicate even more people. The reason why Su Zimo did not even return to Misty Peak this time round was because he was worried that Misty Peak would be burdened by him. The old monk had a benevolent gaze and said in a gentle tone, "After leaving the north region, you only have to remember one thing. If you encounter any danger and have no way out, tear that major transference talisman and return here. As long as I'm alive, I'll definitely be able to protect you." Su Zimo pursed his lips in silence and bowed deeply to the old monk. "You guys can leave." The old monk waved his hand. Su Zimo and Ming Zhen exchanged glances and leaped into the vortex in the void without hesitation. The little fox followed suit. Su Zimo felt the world spin. In his daze, his body and soul seemed to have separated and were no longer under his control. His surroundings were pitch black and he could not see anything. All of his senses were gone. Even his spirit perception was extremely blurry. The two of them seemed to be traversing through a dark tunnel. Initially, Su Zimo could still sense Ming Zhen and the little fox's auras with his spirit perception. However, before long, Su Zimo suddenly realized that Ming Zhen and the little fox had already vanished from his spirit perception. Gradually, a speck of light appeared right in front of him, growing larger and clearer. He regained his consciousness. His soul and body seemed to have fused together once more. Swoosh! Su Zimo charged towards the speck of light and barged out, descending rapidly. This was a brand new world. The spirit chi was extremely rich and was many times richer than the outside world. Su Zimo knew that he had already entered the intermediate ancient battlefield. Su Zimo released his spirit perception and scanned his surroundings warily. There was no one around. Ming Zhen and the little fox had already vanished. Su Zimo furrowed his brows slightly. He realized that an accident occurred during the teleportation process and they were separated. A slight deviation in the teleportation process could result in a distance of 500 kilometers. However, Su Zimo was not worried about Ming Zhen. Ever since Di Yin left the old temple, Ming Zhen had been fighting against otherworldly soldiers in the Great Qian ruins for the past 10 years and had experienced several life-and-death situations as well. Ming Zhen's combat experience was much richer now. Furthermore, Ming Zhen was not weak to begin with and had even cultivated the world-cleansing Qinglian that was once ranked in the top 10 of the phenomenon ranking. The one that Su Zimo was truly worried about was the little fox. However, it was akin to searching for a needle in a haystack if he wanted to find a fox in this massive world. Taking a deep breath of air, Su Zimo roughly determined his direction and headed towards the center of the ancient battlefield. The spirit qi here was way too rich and spirit materials and herbs could be seen everywhere. In some places, the spirit qi even formed lakes. If nothing went wrong, Su Zimo would definitely be able to break through to the perfected Jin Dan realm a year later. Along the way, although the surroundings were lush, he did not see a single cultivator. Before long. Su Zimo felt something. Not far away, a demon beast was sprawled in a patch of grass that was taller than a person. Its eyes were green and extremely terrifying as it glared at Su Zimo. Su Zimo was not bothered and continued forward. When he passed by the demon beast, the grass moved and the demon beast leaped up with a berserk killing intent, lunging towards Su Zimo fiercely. Roar! A deafening roar burst forth from the depths of the demon beast's throat. If it was any other ordinary cultivator, they would definitely be stunned by the sudden attack of the demon beast and die under the claws of the demon beast with a single roar. However, Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness and was the strongest demon. That roar had no effect on him at all. Su Zimo turned his head slightly and looked at the demon beast that was lunging over with a fake smile. Suddenly, he opened his mouth. OM! The demon beast that was lunging over froze in midair with a dazed gaze. It was stunned. Chapter 638. This was a heaven-bane wolf, an ancient remnant beast. It was dozens of feet long and was covered in blood-red fur. Bloodthirsty, it traveled alone most of the time and was extremely strong and ferocious. But right now, the ancient remnant beast's gaze was unfocused and it had already lost consciousness from the shock. In reality, the damning mantra alone would not have been able to achieve such a terrifying effect. More than that, Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. His lungs were strong, his breathing was long and his mouth and tongue were connected, his explosive power was shocking. Ordinary demon beasts would not be able to withstand a single roar, let alone the release of the damning mantra. Cultivators who were not strong enough would be killed on the spot. Su Zimo extended his arm and spread his fingers, pressing down on the heaven-bane wolf's forehead. A man and a wolf fell rapidly. Boom! The heaven-bane wolf's head was pressed into the mud by Su Zimo, creating a huge pit and almost suffocating. Rar, rar! The heaven-bane wolf woke up and struggled continuously. Its sharp claws were like daggers as it dug furiously into the ground, causing mud to fly everywhere. It let out a series of threatening roars and its fur stood on end. However, no matter how it struggled, it could not break free from Su Zimo's grip. That palm was fair, tender and sparkling like jade. It did not look like it had wielded a weapon before. However, when the palm spread open, it seemed to have turned into a mountain that pinned the heaven-bane wolf's head to the ground. Su Zimo's gaze turned cold and killing intent appeared on his face. As though it sensed something, the heaven-bane wolf shuddered and stopped struggling. Demon beasts were extremely sensitive towards danger. Furthermore, for it to be able to cultivate to this point, it had already gained sentience and could naturally tell that Su Zimo had already held back. When he saw that the heaven-bane wolf was motionless, Su Zimo released his grip. Panting heavily, the heaven-bane wolf raised its head slightly and looked at the human that was inches away. Killing intent surged in its heart once more. Under normal circumstances, cultivators had weak physiques. At this distance, there was a high chance that it would succeed. But in the blink of an eye, it gave up. Su Zimo was expressionless and his gaze was calm. The heaven-bane wolf had a premonition that if it were to make a single move, it would be killed by this human. Su Zimo flipped himself onto the back of the heaven-bane wolf. He patted the wolf's head and pointed towards the depths of the battlefield, saying, "Over there." The heaven-bane wolf stood up unwillingly and shook off the dust on its head. With a low growl, it dashed towards the depths of the battlefield. In its heart, as long as Su Zimo did not sign a blood oath with it, it would listen to the arrangements of this human. Sitting on the back of the heaven-bane wolf, Su Zimo could calm down and cultivate. He was now at the peak of the late Jin Dan stage. In an environment with such dense spiritual energy, as long as he cultivated for a period of time, he would definitely be able to sense the opportunity to break through. 10 days later. Su Zimo, who was sitting on the heaven-bane wolf, suddenly woke up from his cultivation. His ears twitched and he could vaguely hear the sounds of fighting from afar, mixed with the roars of demon beasts. "Let's go over there and take a look." Su Zimo patted the heaven-bane wolf and pointed in another direction. The heaven-bane wolf sprinted and arrived at the entrance of a valley before long. There were at least 1,000 demon beasts attacking a group of cultivators in the valley. The scary thing was that almost all of the demon beasts were ancient remnant beasts. On a mountain peak at the edge of the valley stood a gigantic lion. Its fur was golden and it was majestic. Its eyes were the size of copper bells as it looked down at the valley. A golden lion. This was a true pure-blooded ferocious beast. Furthermore, Su Zimo could sense that the golden lion was extremely strong and had already cultivated to the peak of the inner core realm. It was just a step away from becoming a fiend demon. The heaven-bane wolf let out a clear look of fear and wanted to retreat and escape as soon as possible. However, Su Zimo's body was getting heavier and heavier, almost crushing it to the ground. The heaven-bane wolf could not help but grumble internally. Su Zimo swept his gaze across the valley with a calm expression. In the valley, there was a small green flower growing on a cliff. A green fruit the size of an infant's fist was formed on the flower. It was filled with white spots and emitted a faint fragrance. Spirit-gathering fruit. The conflict between the two parties should be because of the spirit-gathering fruit. The old monk had mentioned earlier that cultivators were not the only ones who needed spirit items such as the spirit-gathering fruit and soul-nourishing blood ginseng, even demon beasts were after them. There were both men and women on the side that was being attacked. There were dozens of corpses beneath their feet that were completely unrecognizable. The corpses were almost trampled to death by the demons. There were more than 10 cultivators left, both men and women, all of them were injured. However, they were huddled together and defended in a methodical manner with extraordinary methods. It was clear that they were from a major sect and were trying their best to hold on. The golden lion turned its head slightly and surveyed Su Zimo. However, it did not sense any threat and a look of mockery flashed through its eyes. Roar! The golden lion roared and stomped heavily on the mountain peak. The mountain peak collapsed immediately. Countless rocks rolled down in a terrifying manner. This was truly a move that could shake a mountain. The heaven-bane wolf shuddered and felt even more fearful. As though they had heard an order, the 1,000 ancient remnant beasts slowed down their attacks and gradually came to a stop. However, the ancient remnant beasts surrounded the remaining cultivators and devoured the flesh of the humans beneath their feet with a ferocious glint in their eyes. They were incomparably savage. The 2 remaining female cultivators in the crowd vomited endlessly when they saw that. The owners of the flesh and blood were from the same sect as them. One of them broke down on the spot and bawled. The remaining male cultivators were pale and trembling as well. "You lowly humans, do you still want to resist? I'll give you guys a chance. Sign a blood oath with me and be my slaves." The golden lion spoke in human language with a stern gaze. When he heard that, Su Zimo frowned. In order to control demon beasts and prevent them from betraying, cultivators would sign blood oaths with them. Su Zimo had not expected that demons would have a similar blood oath as well. Instead, demons wanted to take in humans as their slaves. The Golden Lion declared loudly, "It's your honor to be my slaves." In the primordial era, humans were enslaved by the 10,000 races. Your bloodline is weak and you're lowly to the core with lives as worthless as grass. You guys were born as slaves. Born as slaves. Those words were extremely piercing to Su Zimo. Although he was a demonic cultivator, he was a human. The contempt in the Golden Lion's tone was something that Su Zimo could empathize with. It was as though he had returned to the primordial era where humans were humiliated. The remaining cultivators had terrible expressions. This was the Golden Lion's final warning to them. If they refused, they would be torn to shreds by the 1,000 ancient remnant beasts around them. The leader looked indignant but could only sigh gently. How arrogant. Before that person could finish, a mocking voice sounded from outside the valley, interrupting him. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Countless gazes were focused on the entrance of the valley. A green-robed cultivator riding on a heaven-bane wolf walked in slowly with a calm expression and a calm gaze. Chapter 639. The heaven-bane wolf's legs were already trembling when it was glared at by 1,000 ancient remnant beasts. At that moment, it could only brace itself and walk in. Another lowly ant. The Golden Lion could not help but sneer coldly when it sensed no threat from Su Zimo. The dozens of trapped cultivators looked at Su Zimo with anticipation. However, they were disappointed when they realized that there was no spirit energy fluctuation within the green-robed cultivator's body. Su Zimo carried the Mingwang prayer beads with him and stayed in seclusion at the bottom of the Dragon Burial Valley for 20 years, chanting sutras daily. Right now, his aura was extraordinary and ordinary people would not be able to tell his true strength. The reason why I want to subdue these humans as slaves is because their strength is passable. You're just an ant that doesn't know what's good for you. You're not even qualified to be my mount. The Golden Lion looked down at Su Zimo with a cold gaze and said indifferently, "Kill him." Howl. Two demon beasts closest to the entrance of the valley spun around fiercely with ferocious gazes. Circulating their inner cores, demonic chi surged as they lunged towards Su Zimo. Su Zimo slapped his storage bag with a calm expression. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Two flying swords appeared in midair. The swords quivered and buzzed endlessly with spirit lights shining brightly. For spirit patterns, supreme-grade spirit weapons. Two supreme-grade spirit weapons right off the bat, that was rather impressive in the cultivation world. However, this was the ancient battlefield. Those who were qualified and capable to enter were all geniuses and elites of the major sects and factions. It was normal for them to have one or two supreme-grade spirit weapons in their storage bags. The dozens of cultivators exchanged glances and shook their heads, sighing internally. This is someone who doesn't know what's good for him. If he wants to fight against these demon beasts with those two supreme-grade flying swords, it'll be akin to an ant trying to shake a tree. That person doesn't look old. He must have made a name for himself at a young age and hasn't suffered any setbacks. Sigh. When the two ancient remnant beasts caught sight of Su Zimo's flying swords, they were expressionless and sped up. However, the next moment, the expressions of the two ancient remnant beasts changed. Whoosh! The two flying swords disappeared in front of everyone's eyes, and only the sound of air being torn apart could be heard. The two ancient remnant beasts panicked. Although they were ancient remnant beasts with thick hides, the sharpness of supreme-grade flying swords was enough to kill them. Puff! Puff! Before the two ancient remnant beasts could dodge, a stream of blood spewed out of their heads. The two flying swords directly pierced through their heads. There was not a single drop of blood on the sword. It was sharp and sharp. It circled in the air and returned to Su Zimo. It was too fast. Moreover, there was no trace of it. It was as though two flying swords had appeared out of nowhere and killed the two ancient remnant beasts. The leader of the group, a blue-robed man, exclaimed softly. His eyes lit up as he murmured, "What a powerful sword-controlling technique." In the crowd, the female cultivator who was kneeling on the ground with a mental breakdown also stopped crying. She blinked her big watery eyes and looked at this scene with surprise. Su Zimo had learned a variety of things since he started cultivating. However, all of them were top-tier cultivation techniques and secret skills that were not passed down. Just now, his sword-controlling technique was one of the most basic of his many techniques. Misty Sword had 3 stages: Afterimage, Nothingness, and Misty. Right now, Su Zimo had already cultivated to the ethereal realm. The flying swords were extremely fast, unpredictable and hard to find. Unless it was a cultivator with extremely strong senses, it was difficult to defend against level 3 ethereal sword. There were way too many ways Su Zimo could deal with these ancient remnant beasts. The simplest and most brutal way was to rely on his terrifying bloodline and physique to barge in recklessly. There was no way the ancient remnant beasts could stop him. However, Su Zimo did not do that at that moment. Sensing the contempt and mockery of the golden lion, he was going to use the methods of a cultivator to kill these ancient remnant beasts and suppress the golden lion. After the 2 ancient remnant beasts died, more than 10 ancient remnant beasts charged forward without waiting for the golden lion's orders. "This is bad," the blue-robed man shook his head. Although this person's sword-controlling technique is brilliant, he can't fight with his fists. Before he could finish his sentence, he choked back his words. Su Zimo slapped his storage bag and a total of 25 flying swords appeared in the void. Including the 2 flying swords from before, there were a total of 27 flying swords. What was even more frightening was that all 27 flying swords were supreme-grade spirit weapons. If it was said that it was nothing for a perfected Jin Dan to have 2 supreme-grade spirit weapons in the ancient battlefield, it was frightening for him to have more than 20 supreme-grade spirit weapons. So many flying swords. The cultivators were dumbfounded. They had never seen someone take out so many flying swords at once. The 27 flying swords hovered in front of Su Zimo in an orderly manner. Shining with a blinding light, they sped towards the incoming ancient remnant beasts. Shoo! The 27 flying swords vanished once more. In the blink of an eye, the 27 flying swords reappeared. At the same time, the ancient remnant beasts that pounced over fell one after another with bloody holes in their heads. They were dead. This, the blue-robed man and the others were shocked. To be able to control 27 flying swords to such a fine degree was a very difficult thing to do. The scariest thing was that the green-robed cultivator did not have any emotions in his eyes the entire time. It was as though everything before him was within his expectations. Roar! Roar! A commotion broke out among the demon beasts. The death of more than 10 ancient remnant beasts was nothing much for the massive demon beast horde. However, they could sense a dangerous aura coming from the green-robed cultivator. "You're an interesting human. You're qualified to be my mount." The golden lion spoke in human language and nodded confidently. Ha 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 ha. Su Zimo reared his head in laughter as the 27 flying swords circled around him. He shouted, "Yellow Lion, let's see who's going to be subdued today." "Senior Brother Zhu, this person is not weak. There seems to be a chance for us to be saved," the beautiful female cultivator at the side whispered with sparkling eyes. "That's hard to say," the blue-robed man shook his head. "From the looks of it, this person's limit is to control 27 flying swords. Don't forget that there are thousands of demon beasts around us. If they all swarm him, he won't be able to defend against them." Frowning, the beautiful female cultivator asked, "What should we do then?" "Let's make use of this time to recuperate and recover our combat strength. Listen to my orders later on." the blue-robed man said in a deep voice. Everyone nodded. Before he finished his sentence, another 100 demon beasts lunged forward. This time round, the 100 demon beasts were smarter and split into 3 different directions, charging towards Su Zimo. A look of mockery flashed through Su Zimo's eyes as he extended his finger and tapped forward gently. Go! Out of the 27 flying swords, 24 were separated. The 6 flying swords formed a group and streaked through the air, leaving sword scars one after another. The blue-robed man's expression changed as he exclaimed, sword formation. It's a sword formation. Ah, he's a sword formation master. 4 hexagonal sword formations hovered in midair, shimmering with a bedazzling light and buzzing. Sword chi was like frost as they blocked the 100 demon beasts in front of them. Poof! Poof! Blood mist spewed everywhere. The severed limbs of many demon beasts flew everywhere, dyeing the voids red. Chapter 640. Sword formation masters were extremely rare and had a special status in the cultivation world. Although sword formation masters were not sword cultivators, their killing power was not inferior at all. If they could set up some powerful sword formations, they could even take on the Jin Dan phenomenons of many ancient inheritances head-on without being disadvantaged. Of course, there was an obvious flaw for sword formation masters. Although the speed of setting up a sword formation was fast, it could not compare to many spirit arts and secret skills. If they were to meet a top expert, they would strike decisively before they could set up a sword formation and interrupt it. It was clear that the ancient remnant beasts in the valley did not have the foresight to do so. Hundreds of ancient remnant beasts charged forward but were minced by the 4 hexagonal sword formations in an extremely tragic manner with their flesh splattered everywhere. Roar! The golden lion was finally moved. Enraged, it roared in the direction of Su Zimo. The valley quaked and the leaves of the ancient trees fell. The fresh blood before them triggered the remaining ancient remnant beasts. The beasts were in a frenzy and their roars reverberated through the valley. Bang! 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 The remaining 1,000-odd ancient remnant beasts turned around with ferocious gazes. In fact, they even abandoned the blue-robed man and the others and sped towards Su Zimo. An opportunity. The blue-robed man's eyes lit up as he hollered, hurry and leave. Before he could finish his sentence, the blue-robed man leaped into the air and channeled Jin Dan furiously. Turning into a streak of light, he fled towards the other side of the valley. The remaining dozen-odd people were stunned and could not react in time. The beautiful female cultivator looked at the blue-robed man in disbelief with her mouth agape. She had not expected the blue-robed man to do something as despicable as this. No matter what, the green-robed cultivator was here to help them. However, the blue-robed man made use of the opportunity when the ancient remnant beasts were attacking the green-robed cultivator to escape. What was the difference between him and an ingrate? Why aren't you guys leaving? The blue-robed man sprinted in midair and turned around. When he saw that the beautiful female cultivator and the others were still standing on the spot, he could not help but scoff coldly. That person is about to be devoured by the demons. If you miss this opportunity, you guys can just wait for death here. The few cultivators who were originally hesitant were obviously moved. Everyone could tell that while the green-robed cultivators' 4 sword formations were powerful, they would definitely not be able to defend against the charge of almost 1,000 ancient remnant beasts. Once the green-robed cultivator was torn apart, it would be their turn next. Not everyone could face death calmly and give up their lives for justice. What's more, everyone cultivated for nothing more than longevity. If he really died here, he would have nothing left. The beautiful female cultivator's eyes flashed with a hint of struggle, but she still made a decision and didn't leave. But beside her, 7 or 8 of her fellow disciples rose into the air, wanting to follow the blue-robed man out of the valley. When the blue-robed man saw the beautiful female cultivator's decision, he could not help but frown and curse in his heart, how foolish. Just as the blue-robed man was about to turn around and run away with all his might, he discovered that the 7 or 8 fellow disciples who had originally soared into the air had not followed him. Instead, they had stopped in place and their bodies were trembling slightly. These people looked terrified, as if they had seen something extremely terrifying. The beautiful female cultivator was the same. She stretched out her arm and pointed in his direction, her eyes filled with fear. The aura behind was slightly damp with a hint of blood stench. The blue-robed man's heart sank. He subconsciously turned around and saw a monstrous beast with a murderous aura standing on the mountain peak in front of him. It was tall and large, and its eyes were wide open. Its gaze was ferocious, and its golden fur danced in the wind, giving it a majestic appearance. It was the golden lion. Unknowingly, the golden lion had already arrived in front of him. It opened its bloody mouth with a menacing expression and saliva dripped down, spewing out a blood stench from its nose and mouth. The blue-robed man sprinted with all his might, almost sending himself into the mouth of the golden lion. Ah! The blue-robed man was scared out of his wits and felt his scalp tingle while his legs went limp. At this distance, wanting to escape was simply a fool's dream. The blue-robed man was scared out of his wits and was about to beg for mercy. However, he saw a look of mockery flash through the golden lion's eyes. Suddenly, it stuck its head out and closed its bloody mouth. Crack! The blue-robed man was gone. When they saw that, the 7 to 8 cultivators in midair who wanted to take advantage of the chaos to escape fell from midair one after another, their faces pale. The golden lion chewed a few times as though it was not satisfied. It stuck out its scarlet tongue and some minced meat splattered out as blood seeped from the side of its lips. The beautiful female cultivator's expression was terrible and she nearly vomited. Just because Su Zimo was still alive right now, he was eaten alive by a pure-blooded ferocious beast in the blink of an eye. Am I really going to die here today? The beautiful female cultivator's eyes dimmed as she lamented internally. Right then, a voice sounded from the entrance of the valley. It was calm but it seemed to possess a mysterious might that could calm one's mind. Candlelight sword formation, transform. Everyone turned over instinctively. However, dust billowed up ahead and their vision was completely blocked by the massive bodies of almost 1,000 ancient remnant beasts. They could not see the green-robed cultivator at all. Clang! Clang! All of a sudden, the sounds of swords echoed through the world. One after another, sharp beams surged into the skies. Immediately after, right in front of everyone, a bedazzling sword beam burst forth from the entrance of the valley, illuminating the world. 27 flying swords gathered together with their tips pointing outwards, forming a gigantic sword-shaped disc. It was as though a blazing sun had descended into the valley, releasing 27 sword chi that was blinding and sharp, capable of tearing through the voids and destroying the firmaments. The power of the candlelight sword formation was much more terrifying than the hexagonal sword formation. Poof! 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 A blood mist spewed out. Almost 1,000 ancient remnant beasts charged forward and were minced by the candlelight sword formation. Flesh and blood splattered everywhere and corpses were strewn everywhere. The entire valley was dyed red with blood. Bang! 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 Many ancient remnant beasts charged forward fearlessly but they could not shake the candlelight sword formation at all. The sword formation began to push forward slowly. When the beautiful female cultivator and the others saw that, their ears were filled with the sounds of flesh and bones being minced and they were shocked. The ancient remnant beast horde was in chaos and retreating. The green-robed figure returned to their sights once more. Riding on the heaven-bane wolf, the green-robed cultivator headed in their direction with a calm expression and a deep gaze. The sword formation was condensed right in front of his palm. The green-robed cultivator merely waved his arm casually and the terrifying sword formation danced in midair, mincing and destroying everything. Everyone was stunned. How was that a sword formation? It was as though the green-robed cultivator was wielding a blazing sun that was plucked from the heavens. Wherever the sharp beam pointed, there was no life. Behind him was a path of blood that was paved with countless corpses. Wielding the blazing sun, the green-robed cultivator traversed through the blood rain and corpses like a divine being of the world, looking down on everything in an inviolable manner. The beautiful female cultivator's eyes were unblinking with a dazed expression. Chapter 641. In the valley, the number of ancient remnant beasts was decreasing rapidly. Even with close to 1,000 ancient remnant beasts, they could not do anything to the Grade 3 candlelight sword formation. Corpses piled up into mountains and blood flowed into rivers. It was as though the valley had turned into a blood-colored hell. Finally, some of the ancient remnant beasts could not hold on any longer and the ferocity in their eyes vanished. Overwhelmed by the fear of death, they began to flee in all directions. On the peak, the golden lion looked down at the seemingly insignificant human in the valley with a grim expression. It finally stopped underestimating him. This human was extremely strong. This sword formation seemed to carry a trace of extremely ancient power, and it caused its heart to palpitate. However, the more that was the case, the more excited the golden lion was, and the glint in its eyes intensified as its battle-intent soared. Even without the ancient remnant beasts, it was worth it to be able to subdue such a strong human as a servant. Roar! The golden lion roared and its blood chi surged. Surrounded by demonic chi, it descended from the skies and extended a pair of sharp claws, lunging towards the candlelight sword formation viciously. After all, it was a bystander who saw things more clearly. Although the sword formation was strong, up till this point of the battle, every single flying sword was stained with the blood of many ancient remnant beasts and their sword lights were gradually dimming. The bloodline of ancient remnant beasts was extremely strong. Even supreme-grade spirit weapons would be weakened after being stained by so much demon blood. Even supreme-grade spirit weapons would be crippled if they were soaked in it for a long period of time. The circulation of the candlelight sword formation was clearly not as smooth as before and the range of the sword chi had shrunk significantly with a hint of sluggishness. The reason why the golden lion waited until now to attack was because it wanted to dispel the candlelight sword formation in one go. Boom! There was a deafening sound. The candlelight sword formation and the golden lion collided. There was a momentary pause. Swoosh! The sword formation dissipated and the 27 flying swords fell one after another, their sword lights dimming completely. The spectators were engrossed and could not help but exclaim. They were even more anxious than Su Zimo at the sight of the sword formation being destroyed. However, Su Zimo was not surprised as he kept the 27 flying swords in his storage bag calmly with a calm gaze. Once this battle was over, he would wipe off the demon blood on these flying swords, and the flying swords would naturally return to their original state. The golden lion was sent flying. It rolled on the ground and got up again. Its paws were trembling slightly, and it felt waves of pain. Even so, the golden lion could not hide the excitement in its eyes. It had finally broken through this terrifying sword formation with its accumulated power. The golden lion looked up to the sky and laughed loudly. Little one, I've already broken your strongest move, ha 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 ha. Strongest technique? A strange look flickered in Su Zimo's eyes. The golden lion's eyes were like torches as it looked down at Su Zimo in the valley. It said loudly, if you surrender now and sign a blood oath with me, you can suffer less. Otherwise, The golden lion bared its fangs and revealed a sinister smile, blatantly threatening Su Zimo. I'll return those words to you as well. With a fake smile, Su Zimo leaped down from the heaven-bane wolf. Golden lion, you can suffer less if you lay down obediently in front of me and be my mount. The golden lion was enraged. However, the heaven-bane wolf was overjoyed. As though it had been pardoned, it ran towards the entrance of the valley with a swoosh. Little one, you've angered me. The golden lion ground its teeth and sticky saliva dripped from the gaps of its teeth as it said word by word, "You had better beg for mercy quickly. Otherwise, I'll change my mind and swallow you alive." When he heard that, Su Zimo smiled. Instantly, the golden lion was agitated when it saw Su Zimo's smile. It roared and its fur stood on end as its blood chi surged and its body expanded. "I'm going to swallow you," the golden lion roared. "Humph." Retracting his smile, Su Zimo suddenly reached out and intertwined his fingers, conjuring hand seals continuously as he pointed towards the golden lion. Swoosh! The wind howled and spirit energy rumbled. The beautiful female cultivator and the others could clearly sense the spirit chi in the valley surging towards the hand seals in Su Zimo's hands like a tidal wave. It was as though a spirit chi vortex was being formed. What a frightening spirit art! Everyone was shocked. In the blink of an eye, a gigantic palm of spirit energy appeared before Su Zimo. Its fingers were wide open and the patterns on the palm could be seen clearly. The gigantic palm covered the skies and pressed down towards the golden lion fiercely. The golden lion's expression changed starkly. It could sense an extremely frightening aura from the palm that was formed. In fact, it even had a clear suppressive effect on its blood chi. What is that? The golden lion channeled its inner core furiously and demonic chi rumbled around it. Ma! Right then, an earth-shattering Sanskrit sounded. The golden lion shuddered and its fur fell instantly. Its blood chi dissipated and could not be condensed, even the speed of its inner core's circulation slowed down. How could this be? The golden lion was alarmed. In reality, this was the first time Su Zimo released the Daming Dharmic seal with the Daming mantra after cultivating the Daming True Sutra. The reason why the Dharmic seal suppressed the golden lion so obviously was because the Dharmic seal was the demon-subduing seal. The demon-subduing seal was meant to subdue demons. The blood chi of the ancient remnant beasts that did not manage to escape in time was dispersed as they fell limply to the ground with horrified expressions. Thankfully, the golden lion was a pure-blooded ferocious beast and could still hold on. However, at the same time, the demon-subduing seal descended on the golden lion's head. Bang! The golden lion had just stood up and wanted to fight against the spirit energy palm when it was pushed back. Against the spirit energy palm, the golden lion's massive body trembled violently. If one wanted to subdue demons, they had to have the strength of a thunderbolt. The bloodline of the golden lion flowed slowly within its body and could not be channeled at all. Thud! The golden lion knelt on the ground with a humiliated expression and indignance. However, it had no choice but to lower its haughty head. Roar, roar, the golden lion did not give up and roared from the depths of its throat. However, no matter how it struggled, it could not shake the demon-subduing seal at all. Crack! Crack! Both parties were in a stalemate and the power of the demon-subduing seal was clearly increasing. The bones within the golden lion's body crackled as its blood chi was suppressed and its body shrank continuously. The beautiful female cultivator and the others were dumbfounded. Just now, the pure-blooded ferocious beast that was still ferocious was pressed to the ground motionlessly. The methods of this green-robed cultivator were truly frightening. The spirit energy palm was still suppressing the golden lion. Su Zimo strode before the golden lion and said indifferently, "Be my mount for a period of time and I can spare your life." The golden lion's eyes shone with a ferocious glint as it ground its teeth. Su Zimo's gaze turned cold. Boom! The power of the demon-subduing seal increased once more. The golden lion grunted dully and almost spat out blood from the pressure, its organs were squeezed together. It realized that if it continued to hold on, it would really be suppressed and killed. However, the golden lion was indignant and had an indignant expression. It was a pure-blooded ferocious beast with a noble bloodline from the wild lion ridge of the 8 regions. How could it be a mount for a lowly human? Chapter 642. The pressure on its body intensified and the golden lion felt as though it was suffocating. It had to make a decision. The golden lion's eyes flickered continuously. Finally, it could not hold it in any longer and grit its teeth. I can be your mount, but we can't sign a blood oath. That was its bottom line. As a member of the golden lion race, it would lose its dignity and become the shame of its race if it signed a blood oath with this lowly human. It wasn't as though the golden lion race had never signed a blood oath with humans before. However, those humans were all unparalleled heroes. Even if they weren't emperors, they were mighty figures, patriarchs or paragons of a generation that could look down on their peers. Although the human before it was skilled in some methods and was lucky enough to subdue it, in the eyes of the golden lion, Su Zimo was way too weak. From the bottom of its heart, the golden lion still looked down on Su Zimo. It steeled its heart and sneered, going all out, "If you've got the guts, don't sign a blood oath with me." "Sure," Su Zimo nodded. This time round, the golden lion was the one stunned. Initially, it was prepared to die when it said those words. It did not expect Su Zimo to agree so readily. Could my provocation have worked? Or is this lad toying with me? Those who were not of the same race would definitely have ulterior motives. If it was in its shoes, the golden lion would definitely force Su Zimo to sign a blood oath with it. That way, it could save its energy and not have to worry about the other party's betrayal. The prerequisite for not signing a blood oath was that the difference in their cultivation realms was too great, at least 2 or 3 major cultivation realms. One of them was not worried about the other party's betrayal at all. Or rather, even if the other party betrayed him, he was confident enough to suppress it. However, this situation was contradictory. If Su Zimo was a void reversion or the Dharma Dao Jun, there was no need for him to sign a blood oath with a Jin Dan realm spirit demon. Just as the golden lion's thoughts were running wild, Su Zimo released the spirit art. The demon subduing seal that was as immovable as Mount Meru finally dissipated. The golden lion was overjoyed as if a heavy burden had been lifted from its shoulders. This brat actually let me go without signing a blood oath. Golden Lion tried its best to control its emotions. It was certain of one thing. There was definitely something wrong with this thin and weak scholar's head. Ha 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 ha. The Golden Lion laughed maniacally in its heart. He really let me go. From now on, I can leave at any time. Why would I still be your mount? Su Zimo withdrew the demon subduing seal and turned around, his back facing the Golden Lion. He looked defenseless as he walked towards the spirit-concentrating fruit. This spirit-gathering fruit naturally belonged to Su Zimo. Initially, the Golden Lion wanted to leave immediately. However, when it looked at Su Zimo's back view, a murderous glint flashed through its eyes and killing intent surged in its heart. Right now, as long as it lunged forward, the scholar would definitely not be able to react in time. Even if he could, the scholar would not be able to release the spirit art just now at such a close distance. The scholar would definitely be devoured. However, on second thought, the Golden Lion hesitated. No matter what, the scholar had let it off first. If it were to repay kindness with ingratitude and devour the scholar instead, the Golden Lion would feel uncomfortable and could not bring itself to devour the scholar. Bloody hell, are my demon beasts going to die for nothing? Just now, this brat pressed me against the ground and my head was almost stuffed into the ground. Am I going to let this go just like that? The more the Golden Lion thought about it, the angrier it got. This was intolerable. It could not let this go just like that. While it was pondering, Su Zimo had already retrieved the spirit-gathering fruit and turned to walk towards it. The Golden Lion had an idea. When this brat mounts me, I'll circulate my inner core and expand my flesh and tendons to send him flying and embarrass him. Ha 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 ha. That's right, let's do that. The more the Golden Lion thought about it, the more excited it got and it could not help but grin. Although Su Zimo had many tricks up his sleeve, he had yet to cultivate divine powers such as mind reading of the Buddhist monasteries and naturally did not know what the golden lion was thinking. However, when he saw the strange smile on the lion's face, Su Zimo frowned and slapped it casually. "What are you laughing at? Let's go." With that said, Su Zimo flipped and rode on the golden lion's back. That slap stunned the golden lion. It froze on the spot and could not react for a moment. That man seemed to have slapped me. How dare he slap me? The golden lion was enraged and let out a deep growl from the depths of its throat. Its inner core churned wildly and expanded its flesh. Demonic chi burst forth and its body was about to expand. Su Zimo was calm and unmoving as a mountain with a mocking look in his eyes. Thump! Without Su Zimo making any moves, the golden lion sprawled on the ground once more, causing dust to fly everywhere. Ugh! The golden lion groaned in pain. It felt as though its spine was almost snapped by this seemingly frail scholar. The scholar's legs clamped down on both sides of its ribs like an indestructible iron hoop. Its flesh could not be broken at all. It was about to suffocate from the pressure, let alone send the scholar flying. Impossible! The golden lion could not believe it and roared internally, "How can this frail scholar possess such frightening physical strength?" Right then, the scholar lowered his head slightly and whispered in its ear, "Be obedient and don't harbor any other thoughts." The scholar's palm landed on its head and he stroked it gently as he spoke. Although it seemed gentle, the golden lion shuddered and a chill ran down its spine. It could clearly feel that the scholar's fingertips had extended an inch or so and scratched its scalp. The fingernails were extremely sharp and were even sharper than blades. It did not doubt that the scholar could create 5 holes in its head if he exerted strength. The golden lion wanted to cry, but no tears came out. It finally realized that it was not that the scholar was stupid, but that he was strong enough. He was so strong that he could suppress it at any moment even without signing a blood oath with it. "Let's go." Su Zimo's voice sounded. Suddenly, the golden lion felt its body lighten, just now's immense strength seemed to have vanished. However, the scholar was still riding on its body. Where did this monster incarnate come from? I'm truly unlucky. The golden lion sighed and realized that it could not resist. Instantly, it turned listless and walked out of the valley slowly. It was a ferocious beast with a reputation in the wild lion ridge. After entering the ancient battlefield, it initially intended to defeat all the paragons of the human race and look down on the demons, displaying its might and making a name for itself. To think that it would suffer such a huge setback after just a few days. Great! Now that it did not have to defeat all the paragons of the human race, it could only be a mount obediently. What the golden lion was most worried about was encountering demon beasts it knew in the ancient battlefield in the future. If those demonic beasts saw this scene, it would really lose all its face. The golden lion clan's face would be completely lost because of it. At that thought, the golden lion was filled with sorrow and its eyes turned moist. "Senior sister, look. That lion seems to be crying from the beating." A cultivator at the side whispered. When it heard that, the golden lion's face darkened and it staggered, almost spitting out a mouthful of blood. "Steady yourself." Su Zimo hollered. Piak! Its head received another slap for no reason. This time round, the golden lion was truly crying. Chapter 643. Naturally, no one could understand the struggle between the man and lion. None of them could have imagined that the pure-blooded ferocious beast had been completely subdued in that short period of time. When they saw Su Zimo approaching slowly on the golden lion, a cultivator turned to the beautiful female cultivator beside him and whispered, "Senior sister, should we head up and thank him?" The beautiful female cultivator's gaze was dazed. When she heard that, she froze for a moment before a look of panic flashed through her beautiful eyes. Blushing slightly, she nodded instinctively. "That's right. The beautiful female cultivator looked at the green-robed cultivator with a strange gaze. All of them were cultivators who had been cultivating for decades or even centuries. Naturally, they were aware of the situation and were well aware of it. The beautiful female cultivator's name was Tang Shiyun. She was extremely famous in their sect and was the true number one beauty of the sect. Coupled with her extraordinary talent and strength, she was extremely dazzling among her peers like the moon surrounded by stars. Sensing Tang Shiyun's thoughts, it would be a lie to say that the male cultivators present were not jealous, they were more or less jealous. However, after this battle, everyone could not help but admit. This green-robed cultivator was indeed a rare paragon with an outstanding demeanor. Although he looked frail, every single action of his was filled with a domineering aura that was subduing. Taking a deep breath, Tang Shiyun arrived before Su Zimo and greeted him with cupped fists, saying gently, "I'm Tang Shiyun of Southern Dual Sect. Thank you for saving my life, fellow Taoist." Su Zimo paused and turned to look at Tang Shiyun with an indifferent gaze. Tang Shiyun lowered her head slightly, revealing a slender, fair neck that was stained with sweat and shone with a crystalline luster. She had a unique charm. It would be an exaggeration to say that she fell in love at first sight with Su Zimo. However, at that moment, Tang Shiyun's heart was pounding uncontrollably. She felt as though everyone around her could hear her and did not dare to look at Su Zimo. In reality, she could not be blamed for that. When her life was on the line, a person like him descended from the skies and killed all dangers with thunderous methods, subduing all demons. If it was any other woman, they would be flustered as well. "I'm fine," Su Zimo said calmly as he patted the golden lion. The golden lion understood and walked out of the valley, ignoring Tang Shiyun and the others. Tang Shiyun raised her head subconsciously, but all she saw was a green silhouette disappearing into the distance. She couldn't help but feel disappointed. Tang Shiyun stood where she was and bit her lips. After hesitating for a long time, she finally made a decision and chased after him. The remaining members of the Southern Dual Sect hurriedly followed. "Fellow Taoist, please wait a moment." Tang Shiyun raised her voice and shouted. The figure in front paused slightly. Tang Shiyun was overjoyed and sped up. Not long after, she caught up with him, panting slightly. "What is it?" Su Zimo turned his head with a questioning look in his eyes. Just now, Tang Shiyun didn't leave while he was fighting the ancient remnant beasts. This action gave him a slightly better impression of this woman. Otherwise, he wouldn't have stopped and would have left a long time ago. Tang Shiyun tried her best to calm her breathing and compose herself. Looking at Su Zimo's handsome face, she smiled mischievously. "I still don't know your name and sect. After all, you're our benefactor and we won't be able to find you if we want to repay our gratitude in the future." Su Zimo smiled indifferently. "I'm not your benefactor. I just happened to pass by and I'm here for the spirit-gathering fruit as well." Tang Shiyun's face flushed red. Perhaps it was because she was in a rush or something else. She asked once more, "Fellow Taoist, you haven't said your name yet?" "Name?" Su Zimo hesitated for a moment before saying, "I'm Su Zimo. I'm not from any sect." At the same time, Su Zimo narrowed his eyes and looked at Tang Shiyun's face. Tang Shiyun's expression didn't change much. It was a complete reaction to hearing a stranger's name. Su Zimo nodded to himself. It seemed like Southern Dual Sect shouldn't be in the North region. There should be very few cultivators in the North region who hadn't heard of the name Su Zimo. "Fellow Taoist Su, may I know where you're headed to? If it's convenient, why don't we travel together?" Tang Shiyun invited with a sincere expression. Su Zimo frowned slightly and his first reaction was to reject her. When Tang Shiyun saw Su Zimo frown, she knew that this was most likely not going to work out. Hurriedly, she added, "Many living beings have already awakened from their slumber in the ancient battlefield. Coupled with the fact that ferocious beasts from the 8 demon regions have entered, danger is everywhere. If we travel together, we can help one another." At that point, Tang Shiyun felt a little ashamed. After all, given Su Zimo's capabilities, there was truly no need for their help. After thinking for a moment, Tang Shiyun continued, Southern Dual Sect is one of the upper sects of the South region. Although our combat strength isn't comparable to yours, we can be considered as a helper. Furthermore, senior brother Zhu is out alone. I'm sure he must have received our spirit crane and is rushing over. That's right. If not for the fact that senior brother Zhu wasn't around, we wouldn't be in such a terrible state, a cultivator at the side. Senior brother Zhu is strong and is a paragon of the previous Jin Dan phenomenon ranking. If he was around, those beasts wouldn't have been able to act so arrogantly. Another Southern Dual Sect cultivator grit his teeth and glared at the golden lion that Su Zimo was sitting on with a hateful gaze. Initially, the golden lion was listless. However, when it sensed the hostility, it spun around with a ferocious glint. Opening its mouth, it roared at the person and was about to pounce. Roar! The forest shook. The Southern Dual Sect cultivator shuddered in fright and his face turned pale. Instinctively, he wanted to retreat but his legs went limp and he fell to the ground. Ha 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 ha! The golden lion reared its head in laughter with a mocking gaze. Although it was subdued by Su Zimo, it was still ferocious. However, that did not mean that anyone could bully it and trample on it. After all, the golden lion was a pure-blooded ferocious beast with a violent nature that could not be tamed. The Southern Dual Sect cultivator was ashamed and his expression turned even more resentful. This time round, Su Zimo did not reprimand it, instead gazed into the distant horizons in deep thought. Right at this moment, a long howl suddenly came from the horizon. It was full of energy. An extremely powerful aura approached rapidly and the sound of fluttering robes could be heard. The person was approaching at lightning speed. Senior brother Zhu. Senior brother Zhu is back. Everyone from Southern Dual Sect cheered excitedly. Su Zimo had a calm expression and was not surprised at all. Long before the whistle sounded, he had already noticed the commotion coming from the other side. The fact that this cultivator surnamed Zhu dared to roam the ancient battlefield alone was proof of his capabilities. Furthermore, there were at least hundreds of thousands, millions, or even more of the perfected Jin Dan beings that entered this place. However, there were only 108 spots on the Jin Dan phenomenon ranking and anyone who could occupy a spot on it was definitely not ordinary. Chapter 644. The intruder's face was chiseled and he had a strong body with huge bones. Even though he rode the wind, he did not seem to have any strength at all. He wore a black robe and had a powerful aura. Su Zimo merely took a casual glance and knew that the black robe was not simple. The surface of the robe was dotted with stars, as though they were tattooed on. Furthermore, they shone faintly in a dazzling manner. If one was caught off guard during a fight, the stars on the robe would shine brightly and stimulate the eyes of the opponent, causing them to panic instantly. Of course, the robe was of no threat to Su Zimo. He cultivated the illumination eye and looked at the rising sun every day. There was naturally no way he would be afraid of these specks of starlight. The black-robed cultivator's gaze was sharp as he scanned Tang Shiyun and the others. Instantly, his expression darkened. This is senior brother Zhu Yu. Tang Shiyun first said to Su Zimo before raising her voice, Senior brother Zhu, this is fellow Taoist Su Zimo. It's all thanks to him that we were able to escape this time round. Zhu Yu's gaze landed on Su Zimo. At first glance, this person looked way too ordinary. He wore an ordinary green robe and had delicate features without any sect badge on his waist. His first impression was that this person did not look like a cultivator, but more like a frail scholar. The strength of a cultivator could mostly be seen in their essence, qi, and spirit. Some people had strong auras and could intimidate everything without even making a move. Some people had ferocious gazes and the void was filled with the stench of blood. However, In Zhu Yu's eyes, Su Zimo was truly ordinary. The only thing that surprised him was that the lion beneath Su Zimo was golden in color and seemed to be of the golden lion lineage. However, the golden lion's body was much more massive than this one. Furthermore, this lion looked listless and listless. It did not have the dominance and ferocity of a pure-blooded ferocious beast at all. It's probably some kind of messy mixed bloodline. This thought flashed through Zhu Yu's mind, but he didn't think too much about it. Zhu Yu glanced at Su Zimo before retracting his gaze. Without any intention of greeting him, he asked in a deep voice, "What's going on?" Cultivators of Southern Duel's sect had already stepped forward and recounted everything that happened in the valley. Zhu Yu's expression darkened. This time around, the Southern Duel's sect had sent over 100 cultivators in. Now, there were only a dozen left. It could be said that they had suffered a heavy loss. The primordial battlefield had just opened. Zhu Yu seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He looked around the crowd and asked coldly, "Where's my younger brother?" "Eaten by the golden lion." The cultivator who was sitting on the ground in fear finally got the chance to speak up. He glared at the golden lion with resentment. The golden lion shook its head. It was not afraid at all. If not for the fact that Su Zimo was riding on its back, it would have pounced forward and torn this Zhu Yu guy to shreds. Su Zimo raised his brows slightly. In that case, just now, the blue-robed man who escaped alone was the younger brother of this Zhu Yu before him. Zhu Yu turned around and glared at Su Zimo and the golden lion beneath him with a murderous gaze. Tang Shiyun's expression changed slightly. The atmosphere instantly dropped to the freezing point. "Senior brother Zhu, don't get angry first." Tang Shiyun said hurriedly, "Fellow Taoist Su is our benefactor and this has nothing to do with him. Furthermore, when fellow Taoist Su attacked, Zhu Wei was the one who abandoned us and escaped alone. That was why he was eaten." When he saw how close the two of them were standing and how Tang Shiyun was clearly protecting Su Zimo, Zhu Yu's expression darkened and his killing intent intensified. "Fufu." Zhu Yu sneered and asked instead, "In that case, my younger brother deserved his death?" "And no, that's not what I meant. It's just that," Tang Shiyun was anxious and wanted to explain. However, she did not know what to say and could only look at Su Zimo helplessly. Su Zimo's expression was indifferent as he said slowly, "In my opinion, your brother's death was indeed his own doing." The moment he said that, the scene went silent. Complete silence. "What did you say?" The spirit energy within Zhu Yu's body rumbled and his eyes shone with a sharp killing intent. "No." Tang Shiyun moved and stood between the two of them hurriedly. She was so anxious that she was about to cry. "Senior brother Zhu, fellow Taoist Su, don't fight. This is a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Zhu Yu smiled sinisterly and said coldly, "My younger brother's death is a misunderstanding? I'll kill him right now and say that this is a misunderstanding as well, all right? Senior brother Zhu, this has nothing to do with fellow Taoist Su. He was the one who saved us." Tang Shiyun tried her best to explain. "Calm down, both of you." A Southern Duel sect cultivator persuaded as well, "Senior brother Zhu, fellow Taoist Su, there's no need for the two of you to fight. Both of you will only suffer." The golden lion could not help but grin when it heard the words "both of you will suffer." The golden lion looked at Zhu Yu as though it was looking at a retard. How ignorant! In reality, right from the beginning, Su Zimo had not been angered at all. He was indifferent and there were no emotions in his eyes. Fufufu. Zhu Yu laughed sinisterly with a cold expression and said coldly, "It's fine if you guys persuade me not to fight. However, who's going to pay for my younger brother's life?" When the Southern Duel sect cultivator saw the golden lion laughing foolishly at the side, he had an idea and pointed at it. "That lion. Senior brother Zhu Wei was devoured by that lion. Kill it and pay with your life." Tang Shiyun was delighted as well and looked at Su Zimo instinctively. After all, the golden lion had nothing to do with Su Zimo. It was a demon beast that he had just subdued and had not even signed a blood oath. This was equivalent to both sides taking a step back. That was the best solution. Alright, Zhu Yu smirked and glared at Su Zimo coldly. Since my junior brother and sister are pleading for you, I'll spare your life for now and kill that beast beneath you first. Su Zimo smiled and said indifferently, what if I don't? The atmosphere that had eased up earlier turned tense once more. Their gazes collided in midair and sparks flew. Actually, in Su Zimo's heart, the cultivator named Zhu Wei deserved his death. When he appeared to fight against the demons, not only did that person not help him, he even took advantage of the chaos to escape. Someone like that deserved to die. Even if the golden lion did not devour that person alive, Su Zimo would have chased after him and killed him. However, given Su Zimo's personality, he could not be bothered to explain things like that. So be it. His cultivation was for his thoughts to be clear and he wanted to repay his debts of gratitude. There was no need for him to be calculative. Therefore, those thoughts flashed through his mind and when they reached his mouth, only a single sentence came out. What if I don't? What can you do to me if I don't? His sharpness was revealed and his soul shuddered. At that moment, Zhu Yu's vision blurred. Just now, the scholarly man with delicate features seemed to have bared his sharp fangs all of a sudden. Zhu Yu had a hallucination. It was as though this scholar could devour him alive. Chapter 645. Zhu Yu shook his head, as though he wanted to chase that feeling out of his mind. He looked towards Su Zimo once more. The claws, fangs, and sharpness that he had felt earlier had all disappeared. The person opposite him was just quietly riding on the back of the golden lion. He still looked like the frail scholar he was. It was as though a gust of wind could blow him over. Is the identity of a sword formation master your trump card and reliance? Zhu Yu raised his head slightly with a menacing gaze and said slowly, let me tell you, in the ancient battlefield, only cultivators who can cultivate Jin Dan phenomenons can protect themselves. Only those who are on the phenomenon ranking are considered paragons. Before he finished his sentence, the Jin Dan within Zhu Yu's body had already begun circulating furiously. The spirit energy within Zhu Yu's body was thick and boundless with a torrential aura. It was clear that his cultivation realm was at perfected Jin Dan realm. Against the power of the phenomenon, your sword formations and spirit arts are nothing. The killing intent in Zhu Yu's eyes was almost corporeal as he said word by word, if you don't move aside, I'll kill you first. Boom. Before he finished his sentence, the ground shook violently. Su Zimo leaped down from the golden lion's back and stomped heavily on the ground, shooting towards Zhu Yu like an arrow. A deep footprint appeared where he had left, and cracks spread out in all directions. It was too fast. Everyone merely felt their vision blur and Su Zimo had already vanished from the spot. Pust. Zhu Yu's expression changed starkly. A shuddering fluctuation came from the void ahead and a terrifying aura surged over, almost suffocating him. Buzz. The stars on Zhu Yu's robes shone brightly and released beams of light. However, the light had no effect on the intruder at all. Southern Dipper Star, Zhu Yu hollered. However, his voice stopped abruptly. Su Zimo had already closed in. In the blink of an eye, he reached out and gripped the man's throat, lifting him up from the spot. Zhu Yu could not even breathe, let alone make a sound. Zhu Yu's Jin Dan phenomenon was destroyed before it could be released. Su Zimo's gaze was cold as he gripped Zhu Yu's throat and swung it left and right. A series of strange sounds came from Zhu Yu's body. Creak, creak, crackle. Zhu Yu had a pained expression as he felt as though his bones were about to fall apart. His blood chi and spirit energy had dissipated and he no longer had any strength left. He couldn't even hold on to the flying sword that he had just taken out from his storage bag, and it fell to the ground. The entire process only took an instant. Everyone was stunned on the spot, dumbfounded. In everyone's hearts, although Su Zimo's sword formations and spirit arts were strong, it was as Zhu Yu had said, sword formations and spirit arts were no match for Jin Dan's phenomenon. No one would have thought that the fight between the two would have such an ending. No one had expected Zhu Yu to be defeated so quickly and so tragically. Zhu Yu's tall body was like a little chick in Su Zimo's palm. His legs kicked wildly in the air as he struggled helplessly. Even the golden lion was shocked. In its heart, Zhu Yu's defeat was inevitable. However, it had not expected that Zhu Yu would be restrained before he could even let out a fart. What frightened it even more was that just now, Su Zimo had burst forth. The two of them were a full 100 feet apart. Even if it released its bloodline and charged with all its might, it would not be able to reach that speed. In the Golden Lion's heart, Su Zimo's strength had risen by another level. You're right. Jin Dan's phenomenon can be considered as the pinnacle of spirit arts and is indeed perfected, being Jin Dan's strongest attack. Su Zimo looked at Zhu Yu's flushed face and smiled gently. However, the prerequisite is that you have to be able to release it. Fufu, Zhu Yu could not speak at all and could only make strange sounds despite his best efforts. Let go of senior brother Zhu. Fellow Taoist Su, hurry and let go, or don't blame us for being impolite. Everyone from Southern Duel Sect summoned their spirit weapons and hollered. Choking Zhu Yu by the throat, Su Zimo turned around slightly and swept his knife-like gaze across everyone from Southern Duel Sect, asking coldly, "You guys want to attack me?" Everyone's hearts skipped a beat and they did not dare to meet his gaze. Some of them were even more terrified and felt chills run down their spines when Su Zimo glanced at them. Instinctively, they retreated half a step back and their bodies trembled slightly. Don't. Tang Shiyun was alarmed. She was way too familiar with that gaze of Su Zimo's. Just now, that was the gaze Su Zimo had when he looked at the ancient remnant beasts in that huge battle. That was the gaze of someone who was about to go on a killing spree. Arriving before everyone from Southern Duel Sect, Tang Shiyun said in a deep voice, "Put away your weapons. Have you guys forgotten that just now, if not for fellow Taoist Su, we would have been dead by now? You've just escaped danger and you're already pointing your weapons at your savior?" Everyone from Southern Duel Sect exchanged glances with ashamed expressions. Not daring to reply, they put away their spirit weapons hurriedly. When he saw that, the killing intent in Su Zimo's eyes dissipated slightly. Earlier on, he had indeed released his killing intent. Everyone from Southern Duel Sect had already forgotten that all of their lives were saved by him. If I can save you guys, I can naturally kill you guys as well. Tang Shiyun ran before Su Zimo hurriedly and said, "Fellow Taoist Su, they were just anxious and acted rashly. Please don't take it to heart." Su Zimo remained silent and did not comment. However, Tang Shiyun could clearly see that the terrifying gaze of Su Zimo just now was gradually fading away until it vanished. "Fellow Taoist Su, I beg you to spare senior brother Zhu's life." Tang Shiyun said, "Although senior brother Zhu is in the wrong, he only attacked you because he lost control of his emotions because of the death of his kin." In reality, that was also the reason why Su Zimo did not kill Zhu Yu immediately. He had just experienced the pain of his kin passing away and could naturally empathize with that feeling. Otherwise, he would have crushed Zhu Yu's throat a long time ago based on the fact that he wanted to kill Zhu Yu. There was no way he would have spared Zhu Yu's life until now. Zhu Yu's face was already turning purple and his eyes were protruding while his tongue was sticking out. Even his consciousness was turning blurry. "Fellow Taoist Su, thank you for saving the lives of everyone from Southern Duel Sect. Please spare senior brother Zhu's life as well. Although he's in the wrong, it's not fatal." As Tang Shiyun said that, she was about to kneel down. "I, Tang Shiyun, Hereby guarantee that no matter what happens in the ancient battlefield from now on, fellow Taoist Su, our Southern Dual sect will do our best to help you. Su Zimo could naturally sense the sincerity in Tang Shiyun's expression. Furthermore, he had no intention of killing Zhu Yu to begin with, he merely wanted to punish him. There's no need for that, Su Zimo waved his sleeves and stopped Tang Shiyun from kneeling down. At the same time, he released his grip. Zhu Yu slumped to the ground weakly, gasping for air greedily. Hissing sounds could be heard from the depths of his throat as though he wanted to suck in all the air in the world. Tang Shiyun was delighted. Everyone from Southern Dual sect heaved a sigh of relief and rushed forward as well. Some of them went to take care of Zhu Yu while others bowed deeply towards Su Zimo. Thank you, fellow Taoist Su. Chapter 646. Su Zimo returned to the back of the Golden Lion and was prepared to leave. Biting her cherry lips gently, Tang Shiyun mustered her courage and cupped her fists. Fellow Taoist Su, it's already dark and we have to find a place to rest as soon as possible. Since the misunderstanding has been resolved, why don't we travel together so that we can take care of one another? In the ancient battlefield, the night was the domain of many demon beasts and mutated living beings. This place was only opened once every 100 years. Everything grew wildly and beasts roamed freely, many powerful living beings were awakened from their slumber. For most cultivators, traveling through the ancient battlefield at night was equivalent to courting death. Of course, Su Zimo was fearless against that. Just as he was about to reject, Tang Shiyun continued, I know of an ancient city that's the closest to here. It's a day's journey and many cultivators reside there. In the ancient battlefield, there were many ancient cities left behind from the ancient era that could be used to defend against ferocious beasts. If there were powerful sects guarding the ancient cities, they could even defend against most beast stampedes. Tang Shiyun continued, furthermore, I heard that Glass Palace has been occupying that ancient city for the past few years. When he heard that, Su Zimo raised his brows slightly, as though he was tempted. When she saw that slight change, Tang Shiyun was delighted and said hurriedly, Glass Palace is one of the immortal sects and is the strongest body-tempering super sect in the cultivation world. In fact, their legacy disciples can even fight against ferocious beasts barehanded. With that super sect guarding the ancient city, there won't be any danger. Initially, Su Zimo was not interested in the ancient city. However, when he heard about Glass Palace, he changed his mind. Back in Tianhuang mainland, he had said that the 13 cities of Yan country would pay with blood. Su Zimo nodded. Alright, I'll have to trouble you to lead the way then. It's fine, it's no trouble at all. Tang Shiyun replied gleefully. On the other side, Zhu Yu's panting had already calmed down. He was not injured to begin with and had already recovered after resting for a while. However, when he heard the conversation between Tang Shiyun and Su Zimo, his expression darkened. He lowered his head and his long hair covered his face. His eyes shone coldly as a thought lingered in his mind. He now had two choices. First, he had to bear with it for the time being and gain a better understanding of this person before looking for an opportunity. The second option was to strike now and unleash his full cultivation. He would release the Jin Dan avatar and not give this person a chance to get close to him. Zhu Yu hesitated for a long time but did not make a move in the end. He really couldn't figure out if Su Zimo had any other tricks up his sleeve. If this person still had a powerful trump card that he had yet to reveal, then if he were to act rashly, he would not only lose face, but also his life. Su Zimo's gaze had been drifting towards Zhu Yu from time to time. Zhu Yu completely did not know that he had just walked one round around the gates of hell. He thought that he had hidden it well, but little did he know that Su Zimo's spiritual senses were too terrifying. He could sense his hostility clearly. As long as he made the slightest move, he would already be a dead man. The sky was dark, and a layer of night had already covered it. Let's go. Let's find a place to rest for the night. Su Zimo patted the golden lion beneath him and said, "Go and find him." "Oh," the golden lion replied weakly. As a pure-blooded ferocious beast, it naturally knew best which places were relatively safe in the ancient battlefield. Furthermore, it was subdued and taken in as a mount by Su Zimo. It felt utterly humiliated and wanted nothing more than to avoid all demon beasts. Therefore, the golden lion carried Su Zimo and sprinted at the front. Everyone from Southern Duel's sect followed closely behind. Before long, everyone arrived at the bottom of a mountain peak and found a cave. The golden lion stood at the entrance of the cave with widened eyes and perked up ears, sniffing furiously to check if there were any other living beings within. "Go on in. It's empty inside." Before it could find anything, Su Zimo patted its head once more. Su Zimo cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, and his eyesight, hearing and sense of smell were much sharper than the golden lion's. The golden lion was doubtful and entered cautiously. Indeed, it did not discover anything after circling around. There were many twists and turns in the cave, but it was connected from the front to the back with 2 exits. That was good as well. If they were truly ambushed, they would have a way out. Su Zimo said, "You guys can rest near the entrance here. I'll head to the entrance at the back of the mountain. We'll gather here at daybreak and set off." "All right," Tang Shiyun nodded. After pondering for a moment, Tang Shiyun pulled Su Zimo to a corner and glanced at the golden lion not far away. She whispered, "Fellow Daoist Su, aren't you being a little careless by not signing a blood oath with this golden lion?" Su Zimo smiled and did not explain. When Tang Shiyun saw how nonchalant Su Zimo was, she reminded, "It's a pure-blooded ferocious beast after all. Although it's subservient to you for the time being, its wild nature is hard to tame. When you're resting, it's best that you don't get too close to it lest it kills you." "Yes, got it." Tang Shiyun had good intentions after all, and Su Zimo could not point it out as he nodded in agreement. Thereafter, Su Zimo and the golden lion left the place. After many twists and turns, they arrived at the entrance of the cave at the back. The night gradually darkened. Outside the cave, the roars of ferocious beasts could be heard one after another. From time to time, the hurried cries of ferocious birds could be heard, sharp and ear-piercing. The sound of some ants crawling on the ground was even more hair-raising. The golden lion was sprawled out in its sleep, drooling. Su Zimo rested his arms behind his head and closed his eyes motionlessly. He had been in that position for 4 hours, as though he had fallen asleep a long time ago. All of a sudden, in the darkness, the golden lion flipped over and opened its eyes slowly without making a sound. Those eyes were bright and frightening. There was no hint of sleep at all. It had not slept the entire time. Tomorrow, they would arrive at the ancient city where cultivators gathered, and it would no longer have a chance to escape. Therefore, tonight was its only chance. The golden lion looked at Su Zimo, who was sleeping soundly not far away, and hesitated for a moment before lamenting internally, "Forget it. I'll spare your life tonight on account of the fact that you didn't force me to sign a blood oath." The golden lion rose slowly and tiptoed out of the cave. Before it left, a voice sounded from within the cave. "Where are you going?" The golden lion shuddered and its fur stood on end. It did not dare to turn back and replied with a trembling voice, to pee outside." There was no sound behind it, as though it had agreed. As though it had been pardoned, the golden lion tried its best to compose itself and walked out of the cave unhurriedly. Arriving beside a green rock, it peered into the cave while pretending to pee. It was dark and deep inside. There was no movement and it was silent. "Humph, to think that you would believe me when I said that I was going to pee." The golden lion sneered and lamented internally, "At the end of the day, I'm still smarter than you. By the time you realize what happened, I'll be thousands of miles away." The golden lion turned around. Just as it was about to escape, it subconsciously raised its head and glanced over. On an ancient tree not far away, a green-robed scholar was sitting on a branch. His eyes were clear as he swung his legs leisurely, looking at it with a fake smile. "Oh my God, oh my God." The golden lion was so scared that it fell to the ground. In its panic, it spoke in human language and said a string of words that no one knew where it had heard from. Chapter 647. Late at night. In the ancient battlefield, beasts roared and birds shrieked. All sorts of sounds filled the world one after another. A towering mountain peak was lush with ancient trees and many powerful ferocious beasts lived on it. Strangely, the entire mountain peak was completely silent. In the dense forest of leaves, pairs of green eyes of beasts appeared. They were looking at the peak of the mountain with fear in their eyes. Two figures stood on the mountain peak. One of them was tall. Although he looked like a human, he was not wearing any clothes and his body and cheeks were covered in long hair. His arms were extremely long and drooped down naturally, reaching his knees. It was clearly a demon beast. The long-haired demon beast had a dark expression as it stood on the mountain peak, looking at a majestic ancient city in the distance. A hint of blood flashed in the depths of its eyes. The other figure looked extremely muscular with bulging flesh that was filled with black and yellow patterns, as though it was molten steel. It shook its tiger head with a ferocious glint in its eyes. The tiger-headed demon beast turned around and whispered to the long-haired demon beast beside it, "Boss, this ancient city has not fallen since ancient times and is guarded by many cultivators. I'm afraid it'll be difficult to take it down." "You're afraid?" the long-haired demon beast asked with a blood glint in its eyes. "And no." The tiger-headed demon shuddered and shook its head hurriedly. After a while, the tiger-headed demon asked again, "Boss, when are we attacking?" "We'll have to wait." "He's not here yet," the long-haired demon beast shook its head. "What if he doesn't come?" "He'll definitely come." With that said, the long-haired demon beast turned around and opened its mouth, letting out a deafening roar towards the forest at the foot of the mountain. The ancient trees swayed and the demons dispersed gradually. Morning. Su Zimo rode the golden lion and arrived at the entrance of the cave ahead. The golden lion was listless and its eyes were listless, even more listless than yesterday. It was scared half to death by Su Zimo the previous night and was on tenterhooks the entire night, not daring to sleep. Now that it woke up early in the morning, it was no longer energetic. Of course, the greatest blow to it was still mental. In its opinion, unless this scholar was willing to be merciful and let it go. Otherwise, it could only be this scholar's mount for the rest of its life. The eyes of everyone from the Southern Dual sect were all red as they felt drowsy. Although this cave was extremely well hidden, everyone did not dare to sleep when they heard all kinds of noises coming from outside. They stayed awake all night with their eyes wide open. Only Su Zimo was full of energy and seemed to have rested well. He cultivated the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness. Even when he was sleeping, he was cultivating while breathing and was not affected at all. Zhu Yu glanced at Su Zimo without saying a word. Tang Shiyun smiled at Su Zimo and nodded in acknowledgement. Everyone reorganized themselves and headed towards the nearest ancient city under Tang Shiyun's lead. Along the way, Tang Shiyun seemed to be extremely curious about Su Zimo as she walked beside him and asked, "Fellow Taoist Su, which major region are you from?" "The North region." "Oh, our Southern Dual sect is from the South region." The North and South regions are billions of miles apart. If not for this ancient battlefield, we might not have met in this lifetime. This is also a rare fate. Zhu Yu did not say anything and followed behind the two of them with a dark expression. Tang Shiyun said, "Ah, right, Glass Palace is from the North region as well." "Fellow Taoist Su, you should have heard of it, right?" "Yes, I've had some dealings with them," Su Zimo replied. When he heard that, Zhu Yu could not help but stifle a laugh. Fellow Taoist Su, don't brag and bite your tongue. Glass Palace is one of the immortal sections. Since you don't belong to any sect, how are you qualified to come into contact with them? That might not be the case. Tang Shiyun was afraid that the two of them would get into a conflict again and added hurriedly. Su Zimo smiled without saying anything. Along the way, they saw many human skeletons in the wilderness. Some of them still had flesh and blood that hadn't completely dried up. It was a ghastly sight. Almost all of those humans died last night. If they could not find a place to hide or a city before nightfall, most of the cultivators would not be able to escape from death. While cultivators slaughtered demons, demons would eat humans as well. That was the cruelty of the ancient battlefield where ferocious beasts roamed. In the evening, a row of ancient, pitch-black city walls finally appeared on the horizon ahead. A majestic and ancient city gradually entered their vision. When they got closer, they could see a circle of cultivators standing on the city walls with cold expressions and sharp gazes. All of them wore the same Dao robes and were clearly from the same sect. On the city wall right above the city gate, there was a triangular flag with two big words written on it, Liuli. More than 10 Glass Palace cultivators stood on both sides of the city gates. By the time Su Zimo and the others arrived, the city gates were about to close. The Glass Palace cultivators urged loudly with impatient expressions. A city gate guard glanced at everyone from Southern Dual Sect and extended his palm, saying expressionlessly, 20 soul-nourishing blood ginsengs per person. What? Wasn't it supposed to be 10? Why did the price double? Everyone from Southern Dual Sect could not help but clamor. Tang Shiyun frowned slightly as well and whispered to Su Zimo, normally speaking, everyone has to collect 10 soul-nourishing blood ginsengs to enter the city. For some reason, the price doubled all of a sudden. What's the fuss about? A city gate guard said indifferently with a cold expression, the city gates are about to close. If you don't have any, you guys can wait outside. When they heard that, everyone from Southern Dual Sect felt their hearts sink. If they were to leave everyone outside at this moment, it would be equivalent to sending them to their deaths. Zhu Yu tidied his robes and walked forward, saying in a deep voice, I'm Zhu Yu of Southern Dual Sect. I wonder if you guys can make an exception. Southern Dual Sect, one of the 108 upper sects. Zhu Yu, someone on the previous Jin Dan phenomenon ranking? The two city gate guards asked with a frown. That's right. Zhu Yu replied proudly. The two Glass Palace cultivators exchanged glances and nodded. In that case, you'll have to hand over 10 soul-nourishing blood ginsengs. The rest of you will have to hand over 20 more. Cultivators who could make it onto the Jin Dan phenomenon ranking were true paragons and they had to give them some face. When Zhu Yu saw that the two of them were resolute, he could not force them and nodded. Everyone from Southern Dual Sect was helpless and could only hand over the soul-nourishing blood ginsengs that they had risked multiple dangers to retrieve over the past few days. Su Zimo did not have any soul-nourishing blood ginsengs. Tang Shiyun took the initiative to hand over 20 for him. Su Zimo thanked her and said in a seemingly casual manner, I'll return it to you tenfold in the future. Everyone entered the city one after another. Zhu Yu did not say much along the way. Now that he finally regained some dignity, he looked at Su Zimo provocatively and mocked, Su Zimo, didn't you say that you fought with Glass Palace before? Why didn't you greet them earlier on? Fufu, why aren't you arrogant in front of Glass Palace? Su Zimo did not say anything. He could not be bothered with Zhu Yu at all. Because from the moment he entered the city, he felt a strand of faintly discernible killing intent. He didn't know how many pairs of eyes hidden in the dark glanced at him. One after another, spirit cranes disappeared into the darkness. The fish has taken the bait. Chapter 648. In the ancient city, most of the buildings that were preserved were made of gigantic rocks and were filled with the traces of time. Some of them were mansions, some were relatively small stone houses and chambers. There were also some large palaces that were scattered all over the ancient city. One could vaguely see the prosperity of this place in the past. Of course, there were also many relatively new buildings in the ancient city that were built by later generations. Although it was already evening, there were still many cultivators shuttling back and forth on the wide streets of the ancient city in a bustling manner. On both sides of the streets, there were glass palace cultivators every 1,000 feet. From time to time, there were even cultivators patrolling in midair. It looked like security was tight. Strange, Zhu Yu frowned slightly and whispered, Glass Palace sent many cultivators for the opening of the ancient battlefield this time round. Something seems to have happened. I guess Glass Palace wants to obtain a good ranking on the Jin Dan phenomenon ranking this time round, a southern dual sect cultivator said. No, Zhu Yu shook his head. The Jin Dan phenomenon ranking is based on an individual's combat strength. It has nothing to do with the strength of a sect or the number of people. Su Zimo rode on the Golden Lion and listened to everyone's discussions with an indifferent expression. However, there was a hint of mockery in his eyes from time to time. Fellow Taoist, please hold on. Zhu Yu stopped a green-robed cultivator and cupped his fists. Fellow Taoist, may I ask what happened in Glass Palace? Why do I feel like I'm facing a great enemy? The green-robed cultivator sized Zhu Yu up and asked instead, Fellow Taoist, you're not from the North region, right? I'm from the Southern region's upper sect, Southern Dual Sect. Zhu Yu's tone revealed a hint of arrogance. After all, in Tianhuang mainland, apart from the super sects such as the Immortal, Buddhist, Fiend, and Heretical sects, the 108 upper sects were the most famous. Indeed, the green-robed cultivator returned with cupped fists hurriedly and whispered, Fellow Taoist, you might not know, but that monster incarnate of the North region has returned alive. Monster incarnate? What monster incarnate? Zhu Yu asked hurriedly. Everyone from Southern Dual Sect gathered with curious expressions. The green-robed cultivator said, What other monster incarnate? That monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. Ah! A look of realization flashed through Zhu Yu's eyes. He had also heard some rumors about the monstrous geniuses of Divine Phoenix Island. In the elementary ancient battlefield, this monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island defeated all the paragons beneath the human emperor's palace and swept through all the strong foes. Obtaining the recognition of the human emperor caused quite a stir in Tianhuang mainland. The green-robed cultivator continued, I heard that before entering the ancient battlefield, that monster incarnate declared war on Glass Palace and said that he would kill all the cultivators of Glass Palace in the ancient battlefield. Why? Tang Shiyun couldn't help but ask. I heard that it's because the Glass Palace once massacred the mortals of the 13 cities. That's why this monster wants to go on a killing spree, replied the green-robed cultivator. Everyone from the Southern Dual Sect was stunned. In their understanding, who would be willing to offend a major faction like Glass Palace for a mere mortal? How foolish. Zhu Yu sneered, perfected being Jin Dan wants to go against Glass Palace? He truly doesn't know his place. Frowning slightly, Tang Shiyun said, I feel that he's not a bad person since he's willing to stand up for mortals. Not a bad person. The green-robed cultivator sneered, this monster incarnate came out of seclusion and started a beast stampede, killing millions of cultivators. Corpses littered the ground and blood flowed like rivers, and you're saying that he's not a bad person. Ah! Tang Shiyun's expression changed slightly. Millions of cultivators was not a small number. Also, the green-robed cultivator continued, that monster incarnate's Dantian was crippled 20 years ago. Right now, he's a demon in name only. Anyone who isn't of our race will be killed by all cultivators in the world. Noticing that Glass Palace cultivators were patrolling over, Zhu Yu shouted hurriedly, that's right. Cultivators of our generation cultivate to slay demons and fiends. If that monster dares to come here, I, Zhu Yu of Southern Dual Sect, will be the first to strike. The patrolling Glass Palace cultivators merely glanced at Zhu Yu indifferently before brushing past everyone. The green-robed cultivator cupped his fists and bade farewell to Zhu Yu as well. Everyone continued forward, preparing to look for an empty house to rest in. Fellow Daoist Su, you're from the North region as well. You've heard of the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island who killed millions of cultivators, right? Tang Shiyun turned around and chatted with Su Zimo. I've heard of him, Su Zimo nodded. Tang Shiyun seemed to be rather interested in the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island as she asked, why did that person kill so many cultivators? He's a demon and cultivators are humans. That's the reason. Zhu Yu harumphed and interrupted. Tang Shiyun frowned and asked in confusion, then why did he stand up for those mortals? Zhu Yu was speechless for a moment. Tang Shiyun turned around and asked again, it sounds like the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island was originally a human. What's his name? Fellow Daoist Su, have you heard of him? Su Zimo smiled gently. I think, his name is Su Zimo. Everyone from Southern Dual Sect froze. Suddenly, the air went silent. The atmosphere was a little strange. Exclamation point. Tang Shiyun was the first to laugh out loud. Reaching out, she punched Su Zimo on the shoulder gently and chided, that joke isn't funny at all. What's wrong? Su Zimo asked with a smile. Tang Shiyun said, didn't you hear what they said? The Dantian of the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island is crippled and he doesn't even have spirit energy. How can it be you? When they heard that, everyone from Southern Dual Sect exchanged glances and heaved a sigh of relief, relaxing. For a moment earlier, everyone truly thought that the Su Zimo beside them was the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. However, Tang Shiyun's words immediately set everyone's minds at ease. The Dantian of the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island was crippled and everyone saw with their own eyes that Su Zimo possessed spirit energy. There was no way the two of them were the same person. The night gradually darkened and the skies were dotted with stars. Right then, a Glass Palace cultivator hurried over and stood in front of Zhu Yu and the others, cupping his fists. Our sect is holding a banquet in the main hall of the city and we invite everyone from Southern Dual Sect to attend. All right. Zhu Yu was delighted and instantly felt as though he was basking in the glow as he looked at Su Zimo provocatively. Su Zimo was oblivious and merely gazed up at the firmaments with a deep gaze. A faint smile hung on his lips as he murmured softly, a dark and windy night to kill, at the same time. In the wilderness of the primordial battlefield, a slightly plump cultivator in a grey Daoist robe was strolling leisurely. Many ferocious beasts brushed past him but they did not react at all, as though they could not see him. Flying beasts flew over his head as though they did not see him as well. The grey-robed cultivator gripped a paper fan in his left hand and tapped his fingers repeatedly at an extremely fast speed, as though he was calculating something. After walking for a while, the grey-robed cultivator sensed something and suddenly raised his head. The grey-robed cultivator's expression changed. Above the firmaments, many constellations were changing positions continuously and the constellations in the skies were in a complete mess. Pust! The grey-robed cultivator gasped with a grim expression. What a strong killing intent! To think that it would affect the firmaments and cause the stars to shift. Seems like something big is about to happen. Chapter 649. Under the lead of the Glass Palace cultivators, everyone from Southern Dual Sect arrived at a majestic hall at the center of the ancient city. At that moment, there were already many cultivators gathered in the hall from various major sects and factions. Everyone from Southern Dual Sect was inconspicuous among them. There were many cultivators riding on ancient remnant beasts around them and many demon beasts roared in a lively manner. In fact, There were even some perfected Jin Dan cultivators who rode on ancient war chariots. Some rode on Wyrms while some stood on ancient ferocious beasts. All of them had an imposing aura. Su Zimo rode on a golden lion, but it was nothing much. What's the meaning of Glass Palace's invitation to this banquet? I don't know either. I don't know what the theme of this banquet is. I'm guessing that it's because of that monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. They want us to keep an eye out for him and contact Glass Palace if we discover any traces of him. There was a commotion. Any reputable cultivator would have a seat in the main hall. Some itinerant cultivators or cultivators from small sects surrounded the hall and watched the commotion. Zhu Yu glanced at Su Zimo at the side and smirked, raising his head. Fellow Daoist Su, if not for Southern Dual Sect, you wouldn't have been able to enter given your status. Do you understand? It might not be a good thing to enter this hall, Su Zimo replied indifferently. Humph. Zhu Yu sneered and was about to argue when Tang Shiyun interrupted them hurriedly and pointed to the side. Look, someone's coming over. Not far away, a group of cultivators tore through the air. The leader wore faint golden robes and had his hands behind his back. He had a dignified appearance and sharp brows. His eyes were bright and seemed to reflect a rainbow glass light. That's Glass Palace's Yi Tiancheng. So, it's him. I heard that after the number 1 Jin Dan perfected being of the North region, Shiwuya, passed away 20 years ago, Yi Tiancheng took over and replaced Shiwuya. Su Zimo's gaze turned cold when he heard the name Yi Tiancheng. Demonist Ji had once told him that Yi Tiancheng, one of Xuan Yudoran's disciples, was the leader of the group that led Glass Palace to massacre the cultivators of the 13 cities of Yan country. Su Zimo shifted his gaze and looked behind Yi Tiancheng. His eyes narrowed slightly. 2 gray-haired old men followed closely behind. They seemed to be on the verge of death, but these 2 old men gave Su Zimo an extremely dangerous feeling. Sealer. Those 2 old men were definitely sealers of the nascent soul realm. Su Zimo sneered secretly. In reality, although sealers were at nascent soul realm in the ancient battlefield and could utilize dermic powers, they did not pose much of a threat to him. That was because the primordial battlefield was a fragment of space and was not stable. The limitations of a sealer were too great. As long as he unleashed the power of a nascent soul realm cultivator, it would definitely cause space to tremble. Spatial cracks would appear and devour him. In other words, sealers usually only had one chance to attack. If the attack failed, the sealer would be the one to die. Behind the 3 of them, there were dozens of perfected Jin Dan. In the blink of an eye, Yi Tiancheng's group arrived at the top of the hall. Surveying their surroundings and looking down at the many cultivators below, they let out a meaningful smile. Everyone. Yi Tiancheng's voice was neither loud nor soft. However, it spread throughout the hall. Gradually, the crowd quietened down. I'm sure everyone is curious about the purpose of today's banquet. Yi Tiancheng smiled. Actually, it's very simple. I just don't want everyone to miss out on a good show. The cultivators below all revealed puzzled expressions. Yi Tiancheng said slowly, I'm sure everyone has heard that a monster incarnate has appeared in the North region. He's inhumane and slaughtered millions of cultivators. He even declared that he would kill cultivators of Glass Palace. I've heard of him. The monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. I know him. His name is Su Zimo. Yes, I heard that he likes to wear green robes and looks like a scholar. Voices could be heard from the crowd. The expressions of everyone from Southern Dual Sect changed gradually as they turned around and looked at Su Zimo instinctively. Zhu Yu's heart skipped a beat when he heard that and his eyes were filled with shock. Su Zimo patted him on the shoulder gently and said gently, don't be afraid. Zhu Yu shuddered and his hairs stood on end. Yi Tiancheng's gaze shifted to everyone from Southern Dual Sect and he said with a fake smile, right now, I'll tell everyone that this monster incarnate is among you. The crowd was in an uproar. Everyone from Southern Dual Sect was in a mess as they looked at Su Zimo in fear and retreated with all their might to distance themselves from him. Many cultivators followed Yi Tiancheng's gaze and gradually noticed Su Zimo as well. It's him. The monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island. He really dared to come. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo was isolated in the hall. Tang Shiyun stood on the spot and looked at Su Zimo in a daze, as though she could not react in time. Despite the situation, Su Zimo was still calm and composed. Turning around, he asked softly, "Why aren't you leaving?" "I don't know." Tang Shiyun shook her head with a pained expression. "I only know that you've saved me and are my benefactor." "I can't." On the contrary, Zhiyu only turned to Su Zimo after distancing himself from him. He cupped his fists emotionally and said, "Fellow Taoist Yi, I'm Zhiyu of Southern Dual Sect. I've only met this person by chance and I truly don't know his identity." Yes, we don't know him." The other Southern Dual Sect cultivators chimed in hurriedly, wanting nothing more than to draw a clear line with Su Zimo. "That beast. Those who aren't of our race are definitely of a different heart. Kill him and pay for the lives of those millions of cultivators. Kill. Kill. Kill." The crowd was agitated and riled up. Everyone's eyes were bloodshot and it was as though they wanted to skin Su Zimo alive. Many cultivators formed a torrential aura that crushed over. Even if they did not attack, anyone else would have broken down mentally. Although the golden lion was a pure-blooded ferocious beast, it was so scared that it sprawled on the ground, not daring to move at all. A single spirit art from each of them was enough to smash it into ashes. It lamented internally and truly wanted to cry but no tears came out. However, Su Zimo was still calm. An invisible aura shrouded his body and was incomparably domineering. In fact, he could even fight against all the cultivators inside and outside the hall without being disadvantaged. Ha 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 ha. Yi Tiancheng reared his head in laughter and looked down at Su Zimo from above. "Su Zimo, to think that you would have the guts to enter the city. However, you're not qualified to fight against Glass Palace." Su Zimo was expressionless as he surveyed his surroundings and said slowly, "This is a feud between me and Glass Palace and has nothing to do with you guys. Those who don't want to get involved in this mess should leave as soon as possible." *T. Zhu Yu hollered and declared righteously, "You're a demon and all the cultivators in the world want to kill you." Yi Tiancheng sneered and declared, "Everyone, there's only a single dish for today's banquet, the flesh of this monster incarnate. His blood qi is rich and his flesh contains a powerful life force essence, it's a great tonic. It's up to you guys to decide who gets to enjoy this dish." Many cultivators licked their lips instinctively and their eyes shone with excitement. Good. Su Zimo nodded repeatedly and said indifferently, "Since that's the case, don't blame me for starting a massacre." Chapter 650. Go on a killing spree. Along the way, Zhu Yu was already displeased with Su Zimo. At that moment, he could not help but sneer coldly and release his Jin Dan phenomenon without hesitation, shouting, "You'll have to get through me first." Southern Dual Constellation. Boom. Initially, the firmaments were filled with stars. Suddenly, 6 stars lit up and burst forth with a bedazzling light that enveloped Su Zimo. A series of terrifying auras burst forth from Zhu Yu's side. It was the power of phenomenons. "Escape by yourself." Su Zimo patted the golden lion beneath him and leaped down. With a cold gaze, his figure flashed and he vanished from the spot instantly. Swoosh. In the blink of an eye, Su Zimo had already arrived before Zhu Yu. Swoosh. It was too fast. Most cultivators could not react in time. "OM." Su Zimo spoke and Sanskrit descended. Poof. 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 Everyone from Southern Duel's sect who stood beside Zhu Yu and wanted to draw a clear line with Su Zimo exploded instantly and blood spewed everywhere. None of them were spared. Everyone was shaken into nothingness by a single Sanskrit sound. Zhu Yu's expression changed starkly as well. A single Sanskrit word was enough to shake his golden core phenomenon. Above the firmaments, the 6 stars of the Southern Duel swayed continuously and flickered. They were showing signs of falling. So strong. Zhu Yu was shocked. In reality, if not for the protection of the Jin Dan phenomenon, that single Sanskrit sound would have been enough to kill him at this distance. His outcome would not be much better than his fellow sect members around him. Before Zhu Yu could finish his thought, his vision blurred. Su Zimo's figure did not pause at all. He bent his knees and pushed forward. Like a galloping horse, his qi and blood surged as he charged straight at Chu Li. His aura was terrifying. Bang! There was a momentary pause between the two of them. Immediately after, Zhu Yu's figure was sent flying. The power of the phenomenon surrounding his body was completely shattered, and the 6 stars of the Southern Dipper in the sky dimmed completely. His body was torn apart in mid-air, and his blood dyed the void. Ah! Exclamations came from the crowd. Most of the cultivators in the ancient city had heard of Su Zimo's reputation, but very few had actually seen him in action. In other words, most of the people who had seen him in action had already died. Now, everyone saw that Su Zimo was actually so powerful that he could actually shatter Jin Dan's phenomenon with just his flesh and blood. Their minds were greatly impacted. Was it possible for one's physical body and bloodline power to reach such a level? One had to know that Zhu Yu was once on the Jin Dan phenomenon ranking. Although he was ranked last, he was still one of the geniuses. No one had expected that Zhu Yu would not even last a single round after releasing the Jin Dan phenomenon. 20 years ago, Su Zimo was powerful. However, his physical body and bloodline power were not at that level yet. 20 years later, no one had witnessed his true combat strength. When Yi Tiancheng and the others saw that, their pupils constricted slightly. However, they were still composed and a look of mockery flashed through their eyes instead. Glass Palace was naturally well prepared for their entry into the ancient battlefield this time round. Everything before them had yet to escape from Glass Palace's control. Shoo! 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 Countless flying swords tore through the air. Countless spirit arts blanketed the skies as they smashed over. Su Zimo glared at Yi Tiancheng, who was standing at the top of the hall with killing intent surging in his eyes. His blood qi rumbled like a tsunami and it was shocking. Boom! Su Zimo stomped his feet and vanished instantly. The limestone on the spot exploded with spiderweb-like cracks that extended in all directions. A figure charged into the crowd and sent many cultivators flying like a lethal weapon that was unstoppable. Most of the flying swords and spirit arts missed. When some of the flying swords approached, Su Zimo reached out with both hands and grabbed wildly in the void. Most of the incoming flying swords were caught in his palms. Break! Su Zimo exerted strength with both hands and hollered. Crack! 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 The flying swords in his palms were snapped by his bare hands. Most of the flying swords were supreme-grade flying swords. The sharpness of supreme-grade flying swords could no longer injure Su Zimo's body. Kill! Many spirit arts descended. Suddenly, Su Zimo opened his mouth and released Thunderclap Kill. A deafening roar gushed out along with the power of thunder. The entire hall was shaking. Right in front of everyone, countless spirit arts shattered before they could even make contact with Su Zimo's body, turning into specks of spirit light that dissipated into the world. The crowd was shocked. Although there were endless rumors about the monster incarnate of Divine Phoenix Island, they would never be able to feel this shock without witnessing it personally. At that moment, none of the cultivators in the ancient city realized it yet. The true massacre had only just begun. What they saw right now was merely the tip of the iceberg of this monster incarnate of history. Su Zimo soared through the air and no one could withstand his sharpness. Su Zimo could even shatter phenomenons on the ranking with his bare hands. The Jin Dan phenomenons of ordinary cultivators could not stop him at all. He was closing in on Yi Tiancheng. Senior Brother Yi, should we activate the formation? Behind Yi Tiancheng, a glass palace cultivator whispered. There's no need, Yi Tiancheng's hands were hidden deep within his sleeves. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly as he said faintly, I'm itching to test my skills. I want to see how strong this evildoer is in close combat. Senior Brother Yi, there's no need to risk yourself, right? Another glass palace cultivator frowned slightly. Risk myself? Yi Tiancheng harumphed coldly. Back then, my melee combat strength was not inferior to Shi Wuya's. How can you say that I'm risking myself? Furthermore, Glass Palace is famous for our body tempering. Why would we be afraid of a beast? Watch out, Senior Brother Yi. Everyone from Glass Palace stopped persuading him. Yi Tiancheng's expression was cold. In a flash, he charged towards Su Zimo who was charging towards him. Su Zimo, lend me a punch. Striding forward, Yi Tiancheng's blood qi surged and his beard flared furiously as he punched viciously towards Su Zimo's head. Although he punched, his palm was still hidden within his sleeves and was not revealed, only the outline of a fist could be vaguely seen. Su Zimo narrowed his gaze and retaliated with a punch in return without dodging or retreating. Apart from Diyin who was at the top of the Jin Dan phenomenon ranking, he had not encountered anyone else in the same cultivation realm who could match him head-on in melee combat. When he saw that Su Zimo chose to take it head-on, Yi Tiancheng's eyes lit up with uncontrollable excitement. Bang! The fists collided. Between the two fists, Yi Tiancheng's sleeves shattered instantly and turned into butterflies. Yi Tiancheng's fists shone brightly and 6 spirit patterns appeared. The gloves on his hands were Khanate spirit weapons. That was his killing move. Therefore, Su Zimo was not taking on a physical body, but a Khanate spirit weapon. Their fists had already collided and it was too late for Yi Tiancheng to dodge. In the best-case scenario, Su Zimo's arm would be crippled. In the worst-case scenario, Yi Tiancheng could take advantage of the situation and kill him on the spot. Ha, Su Zimo, hand over your life. Yi Tiancheng laughed menacingly. Before his laughter ended, his heart sank. There was no hint of panic in Su Zimo's eyes, they were calm as still water. Something's not right. Before Yi Tiancheng could finish his thought, he glanced over. Su Zimo's fist merely collided with him gently before turning limp and powerless, coiling around him like an anaconda. A coil, a tremble and a tug. Shing! A blood mist filled the air. Yi Tiancheng's arm was ripped off by Su Zimo. Chapter 651. Ah! Yi Tiancheng's eyes widened in disbelief as he let out a tragic shriek and blood drained from his face. He really did not expect that in just one round, the victor would be decided between the two of them. These methods of his would be effective against cultivators with insufficient battle experience, but they would be effective against cultivators with insufficient battle experience. However, he was dreaming if he wanted to scheme against Su Zimo. How fast was Su Zimo's reaction? The moment he sensed that something was amiss, he changed his move and released a killing move from the mystic classic of the 12 demon kings of the great wilderness, ripping Yi Tiancheng's arm off. The two of them were too close. There was no way Su Zimo would give Yi Tiancheng a chance to escape. You're the one who's going to die. Su Zimo hollered and strode forward, extending his arm and spreading his fingers. Pang! 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 His spotlessly white fingernails flickered with a chilling glint as they grabbed towards Yi Tiancheng's head like blades. If he managed to grab Yi Tiancheng's head, 5 holes would appear on his head instantly. All of a sudden, Su Zimo felt a sense of danger. Without hesitation, Su Zimo was extremely decisive and gave up on killing Yi Tiancheng, retreating swiftly. A beam of 7-colored glazed light slashed down and brushed past him. The sharpness of the light was so sharp that it almost cut through the void. If Su Zimo was slower by a single step, he would have been sliced into 2 by that glass light. A terrifying energy fluctuation spread through the voids. That power had already surpassed the power of a phenomenon. Dermic powers. Jining Jinjuan had attacked. He was one of the 2 sealers behind Yi Tiancheng. Su Zimo did not take a look. The moment he retreated, that information flashed through his mind. Only a sealer would have such a reaction and be able to save Yi Tiancheng from his hands. No one else would be able to do that. True enough. Not far away, a wisp of sadness flashed in the eyes of a gray-haired old man when he saw that his attack had missed. He shook his head and said, "This person is too terrifying. Even if we join forces, we can't trap him." Behind this old man, the void suddenly split open, and a pitch-black crack silently appeared. A sinister wind blew from within, as if it wanted to devour everything. The appearance of magic power would cause spatial turbulence. Under the turbulence, space cracks would appear, devouring and purifying the source of this power to ensure that the space could continue to operate stably. The old man sighed and said, "Activate the formation." As soon as he finished speaking, his body was swallowed up by the spatial crack in space. His body and soul were obliterated, and he was reduced to dust. Nothing was left behind. The crack in the void gradually closed until there was no trace of it at all. Sacrificial array. Su Zimo frowned slightly as he felt an inexplicable sense of danger. Behind Yi Tiancheng, another sealer surveyed his surroundings and soared into the air, declaring loudly, "I'm counting on everyone to kill this lad." All right. It's also a joyous thing to be able to kill a monster incarnate like this before we die. Ha 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 ha. With this lad accompanying us on our journey, our lives won't be in vain. Voices sounded from the 4 walls of the ancient city. 4 figures soared into the air from north, south, east and west. All of them were old men with white hair. Although they did not release their powers, there was a shuddering aura suppressed within their bodies. 4 sealers. Under normal circumstances, it was already the limit for 1 or 2 sealers to follow their paragons into the ancient battlefield. Some super sects did not have any sealers following them at all. After all, sealers would die if they attacked. Even if they were at the end of their lifespans and did not have many years left to live, no cultivator would be willing to enter the ancient battlefield. This time round, Glass Palace had mobilized a total of 6 sealers. It was clear how much importance Glass Palace placed on Su Zimo. No matter what, Su Zimo's challenge letter still brought immense pressure to Glass Palace. At that moment, Yi Tiancheng's wounds were bandaged. He glared at Su Zimo with a venomous gaze and grit his teeth. "Su Zimo, today, I'm going to slice off your flesh piece by piece and devour them alive. I'm going to torture you to death." Ha ha ha. Su Zimo stood in midair and roared in laughter. "You want to take my life with just 4 sealers? Humph." Yi Tiancheng laughed menacingly. "Su Zimo, don't get cocky. My glazed glass palace predicted that you would come to us on your own and have long prepared. Take this." The sealer on the east wall changed his fingertips repeatedly and his glabella shone, shooting out beams of light that landed on a circular spirit weapon before him. Whoosh! The circular spirit weapon flipped and released a beam of light that shrouded Su Zimo. Demon revealing mirror. Su Zimo's expression changed slightly as he channeled his blood chi. His figure flashed repeatedly as he tried to break free from the range of the demon-revealing mirror's light. However, no matter how fast his movement technique was, it was not as fast as the speed of light. The demon revealing mirror did not harm demon beasts to begin with. Its only use was to seal the inner core or essence spirit. Therefore, when a demon beast's inner core was sealed and lost its power, it would revert to its true form. Whoosh! Another beam of light came from the west and descended instantly, enveloping him. Su Zimo's body shuddered. A mysterious power wanted to seep into his body and act on the circulating inner core in his chest. However, the Mingwang prayer beads on his left wrist shone and blocked the power outside. The Mingwang prayer beads were connate dermic weapons to begin with. Although it was incomplete due to the lack of two Buddha beads, some of its mysterious dermic powers were still preserved. When the beam of light shrouded Su Zimo paused for a moment and channeled his blood chi furiously. The power of his inner core burst forth and his speed increased explosively. He managed to break free from the beam of light. A sealer exclaimed softly, "A demon revealing mirror can't take him down." Thankfully, we were prepared. Whoosh! Whoosh! Another two beams of light shrouded him. Su Zimo could not dodge and was rooted to the spot by the two beams of light. Immediately after, the first two beams of light descended on Su Zimo at the same time. There were a total of 4 demon revealing mirrors in the east, south, west, and north. 4 beams of light descended and shrouded Su Zimo's surroundings. Su Zimo could clearly sense that his inner core could no longer circulate and was completely sealed. At the end of the day, the Mingwang prayer beads were incomplete dermic weapons. However, Su Zimo had not cultivated an essence spirit and could not release the true strength of the Mingwang prayer beads. It was already his limit to defend against a single demon revealing mirror with that incomplete dermic weapon. Now that Glass Palace had released 4 demon revealing mirrors, the Mingwang prayer beads could not defend against them either. Omnidirectional Demon Suppression Formation. The 4 sealers shouted at the same time with solemn expressions. Suddenly, a series of mysterious symbols lit up in the area of the 4 beams of light from the demon revealing mirrors. Su Zimo grunted dully and the pressure on him increased. Under the combined efforts of the 4 sealers, the 4 demon revealing mirrors formed a formation. The formation enveloped Su Zimo like a Mount Meru and exerted pressure on him repeatedly, nailing him to the spot without being able to move at all. Su Zimo could clearly sense that the bones in his body were trembling slightly and creaking in an extremely terrifying manner. Su Zimo refused to lower his head and grit his teeth. His eyes shone with a ferocious glint as he channeled his bloodline with all his might to withstand the pressure from his spine, and the veins on his neck popped. One after another, dimensional tears appeared on the walls of the 4 directions. The 4 sealers were devoured one after another. However, the formation was already formed and the situation was set. Even if the sealers were dead, there was no way Su Zimo could break free. You're tuning in to the Blissful Bookshelf YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.